Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Lenway. Nicole Lenway, also known as Nikki Len Ford, was born on July 11, 1989, in a small town in Minnesota. There is little information available about her parents and early life. According to some reports, her father left the family when she was young, and her mother raised her alone, providing her with a good education. Nikki was an exceptional student and athlete, excelling in track and field and martial arts. She decided to dedicate her life to fighting crime and served in law enforcement. After graduating with honors from the police academy, she moved to Minneapolis and joined the Criminal Investigation Department as an assistant investigator. Colleagues described Nikki as a determined, goal-oriented woman and a fearless officer, ready to take risks. However, in her personal life, she became a pawn in the hands of a sophisticated manipulator. In 2012, at a martial arts competition, 23-year-old Nicole met Timothy Amah, a coach and martial arts master who was 8 years her senior. Timothy, a gentleman man, won Nikki's heart with his charming nature and kind gestures. He demonstrated his reliability and care, making Nikki fall deeply in love with him. They started a romantic relationship and moved in together. Initially, everything was wonderful, and Nikki felt happy and loved. However, Timothy's behavior began to change gradually. He revealed his true nature, but subtly enough that Nikki wasn't alarmed at first. Behind his charming facade, Timothy was a sophisticated tormentor who enjoyed flirting with other women, even in Nikki's presence. This behavior hurt and humiliated Nikki, making her feel insecure. Nikki had hoped that Timothy would eventually settle down and become more restrained, but months passed and his behavior didn't change. He continued to flirt and engage in affairs, assuring Nikki that he loved only her. When Nikki confronted him, he would snap at her, saying she had no right to tell him what to do. He would later apologize, telling Nikki that no one would ever love her as much as he did, and she would forgive him. The situation escalated in the fall of 2014 when Timothy flew into a rage during a minor argument, grabbing Nikki by the throat and choking her until she almost lost consciousness. He then pushed her into a wall, making her realize that she was in an unhealthy relationship. However, her emotional attachment to Timothy was too strong, and she forgave him once again. Timothy's behavior towards Nikki was extremely controlling and jealous. He would constantly monitor her movements, check her phone and social media without her permission, and accuse her of infidelity without any evidence. Despite his own infidelity, he would manipulate Nikki into believing that no one would ever love her as much as he did, trapping her in the relationship. In November 2015, after a violent argument, Nikki gathered her belongings and left the house. Timothy, who didn't believe she would actually leave, chased her down, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her back inside. However, Nikki's screams and struggles attracted the attention of their neighbors, forcing Timothy to back down. Finally, free from the abusive relationship, Nikki felt a sense of relief. But Timothy didn't give up. He shifted his tactics from threats and blackmail to romantic gestures, sending flowers and messages filled with tenderness, pleading for another chance. For a month, Nikki stood firm, refusing to return to him. However, her plans were disrupted when she discovered she was pregnant in December 2015. Nikki knew that if Timothy found out, he would use it to manipulate her into getting back together. She tried to keep her pregnancy a secret, but their mutual friends and acquaintances soon informed Timothy, who urged her to return to him, arguing that their child should grow up in a complete family. Nikki, who grew up without a father, understood the challenges of single parenthood, but she also recognized that being with a manipulative and cruel person like Timothy would be detrimental to her and the child. Despite still having feelings for him, she refused to reunite with her ex-boyfriend, but she did agree to let him participate in their child's life as a nominal father. Nicole gave birth to a healthy boy named Callahan on June 20, 2016. The father, Tim, acknowledged paternity and initially expressed a desire to raise the child with Nicole. However, it soon became clear that Tim was not interested in being a good father and only wanted to use the child as a tool to manipulate Nicole. Nicole took almost a year of maternity leave to care for her son, devoting herself entirely to motherhood. Meanwhile, Tim continued his carefree life with multiple lovers and casual connections. He even had a system in place where he would signal to his lovers when he was available by turning on a purple light in his bedroom. In 2016, Tim started living with his 18-year-old protege, Colin, who had been deeply in love with him since she was 14. Despite the significant age difference, the couple hid their relationship from outsiders, claiming Colin was just renting a room in Tim's house. By the summer of 2017, Nicole was forced to return to work as a forensic expert at the Maine Police Headquarters in Minneapolis. With her unpredictable work schedule, she would often ask Tim to look after their son, mainly because she believed it was beneficial for the boy to spend time with his father and to save on nanny costs. However, Tim would always shift the responsibility onto Colin, who developed a fondness for the little boy and enjoyed taking care of him. Tim would tell Colin that Nicole was a bad mother who didn't want to care for her child and was looking for excuses to offload her son onto them. In the spring of 2017, Nicole started a new romantic relationship with a fellow police officer named Donovan Ford, who treated her with tenderness and care and expressed a desire to adopt Callahan. However, when Tim found out about their relationship, he became enraged and decided to use their son and the naive Colin to destroy Nicole's new relationship. Tim would regularly report to social services that Donovan was abusing Callahan and that Nicole was doing nothing to stop it, resulting in frequent visits from Child Protective Services. For years, Nicole and her new partner were subjected to harassment and intimidation by her ex-boyfriend, Timothy, who falsely accused them of domestic violence. Timothy convinced Colin, a friend, that Nicole and her partner were a danger to their son, Callahan, and that they might harm him. Timothy continued to psychologically manipulate Colin, convincing him that Callahan was in danger and that Nicole and her partner were cruel to him. Meanwhile, Timothy harassed and threatened Nicole and her partner, even filing false police reports against them. Donovan tried to have a calm and rational conversation with Timothy, but it didn't work. Timothy continued to terrorize Nicole and her partner, making their lives a living hell. He eventually took the matter to court, claiming he wanted sole custody of their son. Nicole was terrified, knowing Timothy's ability to lie and manipulate. She understood that he didn't actually care about their son's well-being. He just wanted to punish her for moving on with her life. Meanwhile, Nicole decided to seek a restraining order against Timothy, citing his erratic behavior and the threat he posed to her and her family. She was confident that she would gain custody of their son, but she knew the legal battles could drag on for years. During this time, Timothy continued to concoct fabricated stories, including a false accusation that Nicole had tried to run him over with her car. However, he couldn't provide any evidence to support his claim. In September 2022, the custody case went to court, with Timothy accusing Nicole of harming their son. However, the court saw through his lies and awarded sole custody to Nicole. Despite this, Timothy persisted and appealed the decision. He was eventually allowed to see his son at a specialized family center designed to minimize conflict between parents. However, on April 19, 2022, when Nicole arrived at the family center to pick up her son, a mysterious attacker dressed in black clothing and a mask approached her, shot her 4 times at close range, and quickly disappeared. Incredibly, Nicole remained conscious and managed to call emergency services despite being severely injured. A woman happened to be driving by when she heard shots fired and saw a black figure jump into a vehicle and speed away. She immediately pulled over to ensure the shooter was gone, then rushed to help the victim, Nicole. The woman explained what had happened to the dispatcher, provided the address, and pressed her clothing against Nicole's wounds to stop the bleeding, ultimately saving her life. Nicole spent several days in a coma, teetering on the brink of life and death. She lost a lot of blood and her vital organs were affected, but doctors managed to stabilize her condition. Medical professionals believed Nicole was incredibly lucky, as death was only millimeters away from 2 bullets. One passed near an artery and the other nearly struck her heart. When Nicole regained consciousness, she reported to the police that her ex-lover, Timothy, was the one who had shot her. The police interrogated Timothy, who had a solid alibi since he was at the family center with his son at the time of the attack, as confirmed by staff and internal surveillance footage. The investigation also explored the possibility that someone among the criminals Nicole had previously arrested might have organized the attack. 4 casings were found at the scene, and a camera at the nearest intersection captured a suspicious black Dodge Ram pickup running a red light without license plates. An eyewitness reported seeing the same vehicle, which led the police to check what vehicles Timothy owned. During another interrogation, Timothy mentioned owning a Chevrolet Traverse SUV and a Dodge Challenger, but not a pickup. However, the investigation revealed that Timothy was lying, and a black Dodge Ram, identical to the one used by the shooter, was registered in his name. When shown the surveillance footage, Timothy admitted to owning the pickup, but claimed he rarely used it. The vehicle was equipped with colorful stickers, which were verified, but appeared to have been applied recently. While all the evidence was circumstantial, the police needed to find the weapon and the actual shooter to fully resolve the case. It was discovered that Timothy's vehicle had a satellite navigation system, allowing the tracing of the vehicle's entire route. The system revealed that the car was brought to the back entrance of a Tando school on the evening of April 18th, where it remained all night and almost the entire next day. Road cameras traced the vehicle's route, showing it arrived with license plates. The evening after the incident, the car used in the crime was found, but without the perpetrators. The person who drove the car that day was short and slender, with a feminine silhouette from a distance. As a result, the police decided to detain and question Amah's live-in girlfriend, Colin Larsson. A search of their home was also conducted, and although the weapon used in the crime was not found, the police discovered ammunition of the same caliber. Colin, who was frightened, soon began to give confessional testimony, confirming that Timothy was the mastermind behind the crime. However, Colin believed that Timothy had acted with good intentions, thinking they were trying to save little Callahan from a cruel mother. Timothy had spent years manipulating Colin, convincing her that the boy was being mistreated and subjected to violence, and she unquestioningly believed every word. She felt sorry for the child and believed that Timothy wanted to protect him. The trial of the conspirators began in November of the same year. Colin confessed that Timothy had provided her with the firearm and had taken it back after the assassination attempt, but she didn't know what he did with it. The prosecution was largely built on circumstantial evidence, but Colin's confession was the decisive factor. The court also considered the testimony of the victim, Nicole, about Timothy's manipulative nature and his ability to deceive the women who loved him. Timothy Amah was found guilty of organizing a first-degree attempted murder, as well as incitement and aiding and abetting, and was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Colin Larsson received 16 years in prison as the executive. A year after the assassination attempt, Nicole fully recovered physically and emotionally. She and Donovan officially legalized their relationship, and he became a loving father to Callahan. The now married Ford couple is expecting their first child together, and the woman who saved Nicole's life will be the child's godmother. It should be added that Timothy will be eligible for parole in 2035, but he will be prohibited from coming within 100 meters of his son, former lover, and her family members, and from attempting any form of contact with them. The case of Elizabeth Arellano. Elizabeth Paula Arellano was born on August 16, 1987, in Fort Worth, Texas, where she spent her entire life. She grew up with her two sisters, Alessandra and Giovanna, and the three were incredibly close. After her biological father left the family when she was very young, her mother, Juanita, remarried a man named Fidel, who adopted Elizabeth and her sisters, treating them as his own. Elizabeth had a warm and loving relationship with her stepfather, who supported her in all her endeavors. She was a diligent student and dreamed of becoming a doctor one day. In high school, she met Rudolph Arellano, who was almost 8 years older than her, and the two began a romantic relationship. Although her parents were initially hesitant about their age difference, they trusted Rudolph and allowed the relationship to continue. At 16, Elizabeth married Rudolph and soon had 4 children, 3 sons, and a daughter. However, she didn't plan to give up her career aspirations to become a full-time mother. She pursued her childhood dream, graduating from medical school and working as a paramedic, with hopes of furthering her education to become a doctor. Elizabeth was a kind and pious woman, raised in a Christian tradition. She was devoted to her children and instilled in them the importance of loving and helping others. Those close to her described her as a caring and responsive person, always willing to lend a helping hand. From the outside, her marriage to Rudolph appeared to be strong and happy, but beneath the surface, it was struggling. Rudolph's jealousy and controlling behavior had been a problem for years, and over time, it became increasingly unbearable. In the spring of 2016, Elizabeth finally reached her breaking point after another jealous outburst from her husband. Taking her children with her, she moved back to her parents' house. Rudolph attempted to reconcile, but Elizabeth was exhausted from tolerating his anger and didn't want her children to witness the constant fighting. So, she found the courage to file for divorce. Shortly after, Elizabeth mysteriously disappeared. According to her friends and family, she had been in good spirits and had decided to go out with colleagues to a local club after work to take her mind off her marital problems. On Friday evening, April 15, 2016, 28-year-old Elizabeth went out with her friends to a fun spot. She had a great time dancing, but didn't drink alcohol because she had driven her car to the club and planned to drive home. After a successful night out, Elizabeth returned home well past midnight on April 16th, parking her car outside her house. She then phoned a friend she had been with at the club to let them know she had arrived home safely. However, despite saying she was home, Elizabeth never actually entered the house. The next morning, her mother Juanita was frantic with worry when she discovered Elizabeth was not at home. She knew her daughter had planned to spend the evening with friends, but she should have been back long before. It wasn't like Elizabeth to disappear without a word, and the fact that her car was parked outside only added to the mystery. Clearly, Elizabeth had returned from the club, but where was she now? When Juanita approached the car, she was shocked to find it unlocked with the key still in the ignition. Her daughter's purse and phone were on the seat, indicating that something was seriously wrong. Juanita immediately called the police to report her daughter, Elizabeth, missing. The police were hopeful they could quickly solve the case, given the leads they had. There was no sign of struggle or blood in the car, suggesting Elizabeth might still be alive. However, to move forward, they needed to piece together a detailed timeline of Elizabeth's movements that evening. To start, the police interviewed Elizabeth's friends and colleagues, who confirmed the time she left their gathering and later spoke with her when she arrived home safely. The police also found several calls and messages from Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph Arellano, on her phone, which showed he had tried contacting her multiple times that night. The police went to Rudolph's house to investigate his whereabouts on the previous evening and night. Rudolph claimed he had spoken to his ex-wife, Elizabeth, the night before, and she had promised to bring their children to him for the weekend. However, she stopped answering his calls, leading him to believe she had changed her mind. The police found Rudolph's alibi suspicious. He said he had been at a local bar with a friend that evening and returned home around midnight. While his friend and other patrons confirmed he was at the bar, no one could verify where he went after leaving. Since Rudolph lived alone, there was no one to confirm he went home, making it difficult for the police to rule him out as a suspect. The police were intrigued by Rudolph's calm demeanor, given that his ex-wife was missing and they were in the process of divorce. Despite being married for many years and Elizabeth being the mother of his children, Rudolph seemed unaffected by her disappearance, which only added to the suspicions surrounding him. On the night a young mother vanished, a fisherman phoned emergency services to report a bizarre event. He was sitting alone on a bridge that spans an interstate highway, fishing, when at around 4:30 a.m., he witnessed a car drive onto the bridge, stop, and then the driver throw a large object, resembling a person, into the water. From his distance, he couldn't see details, but it seemed like something heavy and bulky was tied to the person. The darkness and strong wind on the bridge prevented him from seeing the car's make and number or hearing any sounds. Shortly after, a second witness came forward, who was walking his dog near the bridge. Although he didn't see what happened on the bridge, a distressing scream caught his attention, followed by something large falling from the bridge and a subsequent splash, then silence. Based on the witnesses' accounts, the police decided to investigate the pond near the bridge. A few hours later, divers discovered a body with a large concrete block tied to its neck with a rope. The body of Elizabeth Arellano, a missing woman, was found drowned. A passerby and a fisherman's testimonies helped locate her body, which would have likely gone undiscovered due to the strong tidal currents that prevented it from floating. An initial theory suggested that Elizabeth might have voluntarily ended her life due to family problems. However, this was quickly dismissed as it contradicted the witness account of someone throwing her into the water. Her relatives also confirmed that Elizabeth had big plans for her life and would never abandon her children and parents. The forensic medical results and a man's testimony, who heard Elizabeth's desperate screams as she was thrown off the bridge, revealed that she was still alive when a piece of concrete was tied to her neck. She subsequently suffocated to death. The brutal murder of Elizabeth, a mother of many, has left investigators baffled as to who could have committed such a heinous crime. Robbery has been ruled out as a motive, as none of her belongings were taken. Instead, it's possible that the killer may have stalked her from a club she visited or lay in wait for her at her home. Elizabeth's ex-husband, Rudolph, has denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home sleeping on the night of the murder. However, investigators are not convinced, as he has no alibi and his behavior has raised suspicions. At his ex-wife's funeral, Rudolph appeared grief-stricken, saying he wished he could have died in her place. He even helped set up a charity to raise funds for her farewell ceremony, which seemed to convince his sister of his sincerity. However, when questioned again after the funeral, Rudolph's demeanor had drastically changed, as if nothing had happened. A review of CCTV footage has revealed a new lead. A car similar to Rudolph's was seen leaving Elizabeth's parents' house around 3 a.m. on the night of her murder. The neighbor remembered seeing the car parked near the deceased's house on the road. Similarly, another neighbor saw the car parked nearby. Significantly, it was discovered that the car later drove towards the bridge where the victim was thrown. This detail sparked many questions. When the investigation examined Rudolph's cell phone data for the night of the crime, the questions multiplied. The records showed that he made multiple calls, first near Elizabeth's workplace and then near his in-laws' home. Additionally, he sent several messages to his ex-wife, trying to find out when she would return, but received no response. It appears that he had been tracking her movements and eventually decided to wait for her return at her parents' house. The police gathered sufficient evidence to arrest Rudolph as the main suspect and take him in for further investigation. A crucial witness in the case was Rudolph's eldest son, who shared vital information with the authorities. When shown the rope found around his mother's neck, the boy recalled seeing it in his father's backyard, where he had played with it earlier. Additionally, the boy identified a piece of concrete from their garden, which had appeared after the fence was replaced. Significantly, small fragments of this concrete were discovered in the trunk of Rudolph's car. The investigation revealed that Rudolph had waited for his ex-wife at her parents' home, abducted her, and prevented her from entering the house. Rudolph Arellano kidnapped his ex-wife by forcing her into his car, where he had already prepared rope and concrete in the trunk. He then drove to a bridge, intending to kill her without being noticed. However, his plan was foiled when her body was later recovered from a lake. Arellano was arrested 10 days later, but initially denied any involvement in the crime, claiming he was at home on the night of the murder. Despite the overwhelming evidence and eyewitness testimony against him, Arellano maintained his innocence. However, faced with the possibility of the death penalty, he took his lawyer's advice and confessed to the crime. He cooperated with the investigation in hopes of reducing his sentence. It wasn't until January 2019 that Arellano pleaded guilty in court and provided a detailed account of how he kidnapped and murdered his ex-wife, the mother of their 4 children. The courtroom drama was intense, with Juanita, one of his daughters, fainting upon hearing his confession. His other daughters, Alessandra and Giovanna, were devastated, calling their sister's killer a monster. Rudolph showed no remorse or guilt for his actions, speaking about the murder in a cold and detached manner. He did not apologize or provide a motive for the crime. As a result, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Despite considering the sentence too lenient, Elizabeth's family chose to forgive Rudolph, as they did not want to be consumed by hatred. Her parents. The case of Lauren Burke. Lauren Ashley Burke was born on December 30th, 1989, in Marietta, Georgia, to James Burke and Vivian Gershon, who later divorced. She had 2 siblings, Jacqueline and Chad Burke. After high school, Lauren attended Auburn University, where she studied graphic design and was an active member of the Delta Gamma sorority. She also played lacrosse and was involved in various campus activities. Her friends described her as a friendly, excellent student who was always smiling, happy, and helpful. Lauren started dating Sean McQuaid while still in high school, and they continued their relationship when they both enrolled at Auburn University. At that time, education was their top priority, but they still made plans for their future together. Tragically, on March 4, 2008, she began the day by having breakfast with Sean at a cafe at 11 a.m. She then attended class and called her father, James, to discuss plans for spring break and a dentist appointment. After finishing her conversation with her father, Lauren visited her friend Sean in his dorm room, where she stayed until the evening. At 8:30 p.m., she had a planned study session with her classmate Michael at the library. When Lauren left Sean's room around 8 p.m., it was already dark outside. She got into her car, a black 2001 Honda Civic, which was parked in the lot next to the dorm. This was the last time Sean saw her. Michael waited for Lauren at the library, but she didn't show up. He started calling her cell phone, but she didn't answer. He kept calling and eventually got through to her. Lauren told him she had forgotten about their appointment and hung up. About an hour later, at 9 p.m., a 911 call was made, reporting an injured girl lying on the roadside near the Farmville Baptist Church and Route 280 on the 147 freeway. Lauren was lying in the middle of the road, taking slow, deep breaths because she was suffocating. She had many injuries on her body and was only wearing socks on her feet. The traffic in both directions was blocked because drivers had stopped their cars in the roadway to help her. At 9:12 p.m., the police arrived, but Lauren was already unconscious. A few minutes later, paramedics came and found that Lauren's pulse was very weak as they loaded her into the ambulance. She was taken to East Alabama Medical Center at 9:35 p.m., where doctors started trying to save her life. Around the same time, at 9:27 p.m., multiple people called 911 to report a car on fire on the Auburn University campus. Firefighters and police were sent to the scene, but they couldn't find the owner of the burning car among the students who had come out of their dorms to see the fire. When the police checked the license plate, they found out that the car belonged to James Burke, a resident of Georgia. But what they didn't know was that James Burke is Lauren's father. The police called James and learned that the burned-out Honda actually belonged to his daughter Lauren, who is a student at Auburn University. James was frantic to know what was happening with his daughter, but the police couldn't give him any information. They didn't know where Lauren was and claimed no one was in the burned-out car. James tried calling Lauren's cell phone, but she didn't answer, which only made him more anxious. Desperate for news, James reached out to his daughter's friends, but none of them knew anything about her whereabouts or the car fire. He then contacted his ex-wife, Vivian, Lauren's mother, hoping she might know something, but she was also in the dark. Vivian called Lauren's boyfriend, Sean, at 9:40 p.m. to inform him that Lauren was missing and her car had been burned. Sean started making calls to their mutual friends to see if anyone had seen Lauren that evening. He discovered that she had canceled a library meeting, claiming she had forgotten about it. Sean was certain that Lauren hadn't forgotten her evening appointment because she had told him she was heading to the library when she left his room 2 hours earlier. Meanwhile, Lauren's family and friends were searching for her, unaware of the desperate situation unfolding at East Alabama Medical Center, where doctors were fighting to save her life. Lauren was brought to the hospital unconscious and without identification, so the doctors didn't know who she was. Despite their best efforts, they were unable to save her, and she was pronounced dead about an hour after admission. The autopsy revealed that she had died from a single bullet wound that had punctured both lungs. The shot had been fired from very close range, with the gun muzzle just inches from her skin. As police investigated the burned-out car on campus, whose owner was missing, they quickly pieced together the evidence and realized that the hospital's unidentified victim was Lauren Burke. On March 5, 2008, James Burke identified his daughter Lauren's body after traveling from Atlanta. The news of her death quickly spread throughout the Auburn University campus. As Lauren's loved ones mourned her loss, the police worked to uncover the circumstances surrounding her death, including the connection between her murder and the car fire. They also sought to determine whether other students were at risk. Investigators processed both the scene where Lauren's body was found and the area around her car for evidence. Auburn Police Captain Tom Stauffer stated that the department has dedicated all available resources to finding the person responsible for the crime, as the tight-knit student community of Auburn, Alabama takes such incidents very seriously. The police are deeply invested in solving the case and will not rest until the perpetrator is caught. To aid in the investigation, Alabama Governor Bob Riley has offered a $10,000 reward for any information leading to an arrest. The burned-out car belonging to Lauren Burks was brought to the Auburn Police Department, where state forensic laboratory investigators and state fire chief's office officers examined the charred remains. Their search uncovered burned clothing fragments, a melted digital camera, and the car's owner's manual. A significant discovery was a .38 caliber bullet found under the front seat, suggesting that the car's interior may have been the crime scene and that the perpetrator had set the fire to destroy evidence. Investigations involved interviews with Lauren's family, friends, and boyfriend, but none could identify a suspect who had a motive to harm her. Prior to her death, Lauren had been at Sean's dorm, so detectives searched his room but found nothing linking him to the crime. After talking to Michael, the person Lauren was supposed to meet at the library, detectives discovered that when Lauren answered his call, he heard a sound similar to a moving car in the background. This new information led them to investigate further, and they found that Lauren's bank card had been used multiple times shortly after she was found lying in the road. It seemed likely that the person using Lauren's bank card was involved in her incident, so the police started searching for them. However, the case took an unexpected turn soon after. Just 2 days after Lauren's death, on March 7, 2008, at 9:55 a.m., a similar attack occurred at a Walmart parking lot in Newnan, Georgia, about 75 miles from Auburn. A 72-year-old woman was assaulted by a man of African descent as she was getting into her car. The attacker hit her on the head, threatened her, and forced her to move to the passenger seat. He then got into the driver's seat and tried to drive away, but realized an eyewitness was following him and calling for help. The perpetrator, fearing the police would be called, returned to the Walmart parking lot where they had initially been spotted. They abandoned the stolen vehicle, got into a nearby silver Chrysler Sebring, and sped away. Several hours later, 4 officers began a high-speed chase to catch the fleeing Chrysler as it headed towards Columbus, West Georgia. The driver of the Chrysler refused to stop, putting other drivers at risk during the pursuit. Officers observed the driver throwing an object out of the window, which was later found to be a .38 caliber revolver. The chase continued until the Chrysler broke down, billowing smoke from under the hood. The driver stopped abruptly in the middle of the road and opened the door. A pursuing police officer on a motorcycle crashed into the open door, causing the officer to fly over the handlebars and fall to the ground. Fortunately, the officer was not seriously injured. The perpetrator then attempted to flee into the nearby woods, but was quickly caught by the police and taken into custody. Courtney Lockhart was born on October 20, 1984. According to his family, he was a pleasant and fun-loving person before enlisting in the U.S. Army. However, after serving in Iraq from 2004 to 2005, he returned as a changed person. His mother described Courtney as a cheerful individual, but after his return from Iraq, his behavior drastically changed. He stopped smiling, became paranoid about people standing behind him, and would often hide in closets or under the bed. In 2006, Lockhart's personal life took a toll when he had a daughter with his ex-girlfriend. The same year, he was court-martialed for assaulting fellow soldiers, using illegal substances, and abandoning his unit without permission. As a result, he spent 7 months in detention before being dishonorably discharged from the Army in December 2006. In the following years, Lockhart's life spiraled out of control. By 2008, he had become increasingly troubled, neglecting his personal hygiene, abandoning his responsibilities as a father, and developing a severe addiction to illegal substances. Between February 2008 and the time of his capture, Lockhart committed a series of burglaries using a consistent modus operandi. Courtney Lockhart targeted women, approaching them from behind in parking lots as they got into their cars. He would threaten them with a gun, demand their purses, and try to take their cars. Tragically, one of these crimes ended in the death of Lauren Burke. Lockhart's string of assaults came to an end on March 7, 2008, when he attacked a 72-year-old woman but failed to escape a police pursuit. After his arrest, Lockhart, then 23, confessed to the police that he was responsible for kidnapping and killing Lauren Burke. The police interrogation, which was recorded on video, became a crucial piece of evidence in the trial. Additionally, the police found Lauren's personal belongings, including her iPod and bank cards, in Lockhart's car. Lockhart provided a detailed account of the events leading up to Lauren's death. On Tuesday, March 4, 2008, he woke up in his silver Chrysler Sebring, which he had been sleeping in near the East Alabama Medical Center. Desperate for money, he drove around Auburn looking for another victim to target. It's notable that Lockhart exclusively targeted women, never men. He eventually ended up on the campus of Auburn University, where he parked near the student dorms and spent several hours watching students from his car. At 8 p.m., Lockhart saw a girl, who turned out to be Lauren, casually walk up to the car parked next to him and opened the door. Without hesitation, Lockhart grabbed his revolver and approached Lauren from behind. He poked her with the gun muzzle and demanded to know how much money she had. When she didn't respond, he forced her into the front passenger seat and got behind the wheel himself. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the police would soon arrive, he hastily left the scene, planning to destroy evidence he had left in his car. Lockhart drove to a gas station, where he used Lauren's bank card to buy a can of gasoline. He then doused the interior of his car with the gasoline, got back in, and drove to the campus where he had initially taken Lauren. His Chrysler was parked there. As he drove, Lockhart became lightheaded from the gasoline fumes, so he rolled down the windows to let in some fresh air. Once he arrived on campus, Lockhart stole $46, an iPod, and Lauren's bank cards from her car. He then set the car on fire and drove away in his Chrysler. At a gas station, Lockhart filled up his tank using Lauren's money, then returned to campus. However, investigators began to question Lockhart's story, suspecting that he had ulterior motives for making Lauren undress. They thought that Lockhart's goal was not to prevent her from escaping, but rather to exploit her in some way. When Lauren jumped out of the moving car, Lockhart's true intentions were foiled. The investigators were skeptical about Lockhart's claim that he accidentally shot Lauren. Given his military background and experience with guns, it seemed unlikely that he would accidentally discharge his weapon. Instead, it appeared that Lauren realized she was in grave danger and decided to escape by jumping out of the car, at which point Lockhart intentionally shot her. Forensic tests confirmed that the bullet found in Lauren's car was fired from the same gun Lockhart had abandoned during a police chase. Expert analysis also ruled out the possibility of an accidental shot, as the trigger required significant force to fire. On March 9th, investigators questioned Lockhart for the second time. The next day, he was officially charged with multiple crimes related to Lauren Burke's case. The trial started on November 8th, 2010. Lockhart's lawyers argued that their client suffered from a mental illness due to his military service, and that Lauren's shooting was accidental. According to court records, Lockhart pleaded not guilty, citing mental defect or insanity as the reason. Lauren was initially silent, but then screamed in fear. Once she calmed down, she handed Lockhart $200 from her purse, begging him to leave. However, instead of leaving, Lockhart threatened her with a gun, ordering her to remove her clothes. Lauren complied, leaving on only a pair of socks. Lockhart's motivation for making her undress was his mistaken belief that she would be less likely to try to escape without clothes. Lockhart then drove around Auburn, holding Lauren at gunpoint with one hand while steering with the other. Lauren attempted to talk him out of his criminal actions, and when he claimed his life was over, she promised to help him find a job in an effort to de-escalate the situation. Meanwhile, her phone started ringing, and Lockhart instructed her to answer it and make up an excuse to avoid arousing suspicion. Lauren was supposed to meet Michael at the library, but when he called to confirm, she claimed to have forgotten and quickly hung up. Later, Lockhart drove her through the city streets as she persistently begged him to release her, offering to help him overcome his personal struggles. As they drove down Highway 147, Lauren made a desperate attempt to escape by opening the car door and trying to jump out while the vehicle was still moving. In the ensuing chaos, Lockhart admitted to accidentally firing a shot, which tragically pierced both of Lauren's lungs, and she also sustained injuries from the fall. Lauren regained enough strength to wave at passing drivers, but soon lost consciousness. Lockhart, who had abducted her, parked his car outside a church and watched as people began to stop and assist Lauren. Realizing the case of Lynn Keel. Lynn and Elizabeth Keel had been married for over 20 years. Lynn worked as a truck driver, while Elizabeth was employed by Microbac Laboratories. They lived in a secluded house in Nash County, North Carolina. On January 1, 2006, Elizabeth slipped on the icy steps outside their house and fell, hitting her head on the concrete corner. The injury was fatal, and her life was tragically cut short. After a year, Lynn began to rebuild his life after a devastating event. He made a career change, leaving his job as a truck driver to pursue a new path in real estate. In 2007, his real estate work brought him to Latin America, where he met Diana, a 26-year-old woman from Bogota, Colombia. Diana was not only attractive, but also had a kind heart and was a dedicated single mother to her young daughter. Their relationship blossomed quickly, and Diana was drawn to the idea of a better life in America. She moved to the United States to be with Lynn, and they settled into his home in Nash County. This was the same house where Lynn's wife, Elizabeth Keel, had tragically died in an accident about a year earlier. Before long, Lynn and Diana got married, and soon they welcomed a son named Max into their family. Diana graduated from Nash Community College in 2017 and began working as an emergency room nurse at Wilson Medical Center the same year. In the early years of her relationship, everything seemed normal, but over time, things took a turn for the worse. According to Diana, her partner Lynn became controlling and verbally abusive, often speaking harshly to her. By 2019, Diana's daughter Laura had turned 18 and was attending the University of North Carolina at Wilmington after graduating from Southern Nash High School. Meanwhile, Diana's 10-year-old son Max was living with his parents. Diana's colleagues and patients at Wilson Medical Center held her in high regard, respecting and admiring her both personally and professionally. On March 7, 2019, Diana's mother, Esperanza Prada, who lived in Colombia, received an unexpected message from Diana that read, "Mom, I love you very much." Esperanza was disturbed by this message because she was aware that Diana was miserable in her marriage and longed to get a divorce, but Diana's fear of her husband prevented her from taking the intervention. 3 days later, Laura tweeted a plea for help, saying her mom Diana was missing and asking others to spread the word if they saw or heard anything. On the same day, Laura contacted the medical center where her mother, Diana, worked, but none of Diana's co-workers had seen or heard from her in the past 48 hours. An employee at the medical center notified the police, requesting a welfare check on Diana. The co-worker informed the dispatcher that Diana had been unreachable for 2 days. When the police officer arrived at the Keel family home, Lynn Keel was present. It was unusual that his wife's disappearance had been reported to the police by her co-workers, rather than by him. Lynn told the officer that he had last seen Diana 2 days prior, on March 8th, when she left the house. The presence of her car still parked outside the house raised further suspicions. Len was summoned for further questioning. When interrogated, 57-year-old Keel stated that his wife had gone out to run errands but never came back. He claimed she sometimes left for several days at a time, but his explanation was not believable. He was released without being charged. Meanwhile, Diana was reported missing, prompting the police to launch a search for her. The investigation revealed that Diana hadn't used her cell phone or bank cards in several days, which was a disturbing sign. The house where this incident took place is located in a secluded area, far from any neighbors who could provide valuable information to the police. Despite this, detectives discovered that on the morning of March 8th, Diana and Len had a loud and intense argument on their front porch. On the day Diana went missing, a courier delivered a package addressed to her, making him the last person to see her, aside from her husband, Len Keel. After speaking with Diana's co-workers, the police were convinced that she wouldn't abandon her 10-year-old son and flee. The only reason Diana didn't divorce Len was her fear of losing custody of her child. Everyone the detective interviewed suspected only one person of being involved in Diana's disappearance: her husband, Len Keel. Early in the investigation, a troubling discovery was made. 2 years prior to Diana's disappearance, Len had taken out a life insurance policy on her worth over $1 million, with him as the sole beneficiary. A domestic dispute had taken place at the Keel house in 2008, although no further action was taken. Just 2 days into the investigation, the police received a disturbing call. A North Carolina Department of Transportation employee reported finding something on Pokes Hole Road. A man called the police to report something suspicious in the woods, saying he wasn't sure what it was, possibly a body, but he didn't know how far in it was. The dispatcher asked if it was at the end of the road, and the caller confirmed he would wait there. Tragically, what the caller had stumbled upon was Diana's body, which appeared to have been there since the day she went missing. It turned out the caller was a worker who had been checking an illegal dumping site when he made the discovery. The body was found on Pokes Hole Road, a dead-end street surrounded by farmland. Considering the location was 30 miles from Diana's home, it was fortunate that the police found her body when they did. If not for the worker's discovery, it could have taken the police much longer to find her. At the police station, the investigators questioned Len about Diana's disappearance. He stuck to his story, claiming that she would often leave for several days, but always come back. However, this contradicted what her co-workers, relatives, and friends had said. It was common knowledge that Len Keel exerted total control over his wife's life, even preventing her from socializing with friends. Despite the inconsistencies in his alibi, the police released him pending the outcome of the autopsy. 2 days after the body was found, authorities confirmed that it was indeed Diana Keel. Her death was devastating for her children, family, and friends. The medical examiner's report revealed the shocking details of Diana's death. The autopsy showed that she suffered from severe skull fractures and multiple sharp wounds on the left side of her face and neck. Notably, some of these injuries occurred after her death, suggesting that the perpetrator may have had a personal vendetta against her. When police arrived to arrest Len Keel and search his home, they found that he had already fled. A nationwide wanted list was issued, warning that he might be driving a gold-colored pickup truck and that he could be dangerous. After being questioned at the police station, Len Keel drove his 10-year-old son to his parents' home, took his father's car, and escaped. A search warrant was issued for the home Len shared with his wife Diana, and authorities seized a collection of firearms, including rifles, pistols, and revolvers, as well as swords, a machete, and multiple knives. During the search, authorities also found 2 pages from a diary belonging to Diana's 18-year-old daughter in a Dodge Ram owned by Len Keel. When asked about the contents of the diary pages, the sheriff declined to comment, stating that he did not feel comfortable sharing the information. The search for Len Keel, Diana's husband, continued as his whereabouts remained unknown after leaving the state. Although the sheriff's office received tips about his truck's location in Texas and Florida, no further information about his capture was confirmed. Stone requested the public's help to look out for Keel's pickup truck with the listed license plate number at local motels and hotels. On March 17, 2019, 5 days after Diana's body was found, Arizona State Police arrested Len Keel, 34 miles from the U.S.-Mexico border. At the time of his arrest, he had a large amount of cash and canned goods, allegedly planning to escape into Mexico. Following his arrest, Len Keel was flown back to Nash County, where he was charged with his wife's murder and kidnapping. Investigators believed Diana was still alive when she was put into her own SUV, driven into the woods, and left to die. Forensic evidence found in the bedroom of their home confirmed that the attack on Diana took place there. After abducting Diana, Keel went to a remote area and later visited a local Walmart to purchase cleaning supplies, which he used to try to conceal evidence of the crime. The heinous nature of the crime, combined with Keel's attempted escape from justice, sparked widespread media coverage at the local, state, and national levels. As a result, the public defender requested a change of venue to select a jury pool outside of Nash County, away from the intense media scrutiny. Len Keel, 59, pleaded no contest to the charges in October 2021, avoiding a long trial. By doing so, Keel accepted responsibility for the crimes. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and first-degree kidnapping. Keel's defense team requested that the judge consider his deteriorating health, specifically his kidney failure, and the fact that he has been in prison for 2 years during the sentencing. However, Diana's mother addressed the court, remembering the tragic reason her daughter was killed. She took the opportunity to convey a crucial message to women who may be in similar situations, urging them to leave abusive partners and not stay in harmful relationships. Diana Alejandra Keel's family expressed their gratitude to law enforcement for capturing and bringing to justice Len Keel, the suspect in Diana's murder. It remains unclear what motivated Len Keel to commit the crime, but it's possible he was driven by his discovery that Diana planned to meet with a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings and was also aware of a life insurance policy worth over $1 million. Len Keel received a prison sentence of 32 to 41 years. However, the investigation didn't end there. Authorities also looked into the death of Len Keel's first wife, Elizabeth, which was initially ruled an accident. But her family had always questioned the events that led to her death. Elizabeth Keel's body may be exhumed if new evidence arises. Dr. John Butts, a veteran medical examiner, only considers exhumation when there are unanswered questions. While some initially accidental deaths were later deemed murders, there's been no new information in Keel's case in 2 years, suggesting no reason to reopen the investigation. However, new details may emerge in the future. The case of Jody Sanderholm. Jody Leanne Sanderholm was born on September 26, 1987, in Arkansas City to parents Brian and Cindy Sanderholm. As the third of 3 children, she had an older brother named Jason and an older sister named Jennifer. From an early age, Jody had a passion for dance, which played a significant role in her life. However, she also prioritized her education and excelled in her studies. Jody's academic achievements were impressive, earning her one of 4 valedictorian spots in her graduating class. During her high school years, she was an active member of the National Honor Society, received recognition as a Kansas State Scholar, and was awarded the Outstanding Physics Student of the Year award. Additionally, she was captain of the Ark City High School dance team for 2 years and an instructor for both Ark City Dance and the Universal Dance Association. After graduating, Jody attended Cowley College, where she studied pre-pharmacy and was part of the Cowley Tigerette dance line. On the morning of January 5, 2007, Jody drove to college for a dance rehearsal that was scheduled to end at 10:45 a.m. After the rehearsal, she planned to return home. However, when her mother, Cindy, called her cell phone multiple times, Jody didn't answer, which was unusual for her. Being a responsible and communicative person, Jody always kept in touch with her family, and her mother's repeated calls went unanswered, leaving her with a sense of unease. Cindy left work early to check on Jody, who should have returned from dance rehearsal. But when Cindy arrived home, she noticed Jody's car was missing, which only added to her anxiety. Entering the house, Cindy realized Jody was not there. Her dance uniform, which she usually washed after rehearsal, was nowhere to be found. The shower stall was dry, suggesting Jody hadn't showered after dance class. Cindy soon discovered that Jody had not contacted her father or sister Jennifer either. Jody had a noon appointment, but she didn't show up. Cindy and Brian began calling Jody's friends, hoping someone had seen her. But none of them had since the morning rehearsal ended. The dance team was scheduled to perform at a basketball game that evening, and Jody, as the choreographer, wouldn't have missed it voluntarily. However, she didn't show up. By 6 p.m., Cindy and Brian were still unable to locate Jody, so they contacted the police and reported her missing. The sheriff's office quickly created flyers with Jody's description and began investigating her last known whereabouts, issuing an APB on her vehicle. On January 6th, Jody's best friend, Lori Leglider, whom she had known since high school and had danced with, provided crucial information to the police. The two friends had also attended Cali College together, where they studied dance. Lori told the police that she had left her job at Sirloin Stockade in Arkansas City around 10 p.m. on Tuesday, January 2nd, and had noticed a light blue car driving by the restaurant multiple times as she departed. Lori noticed a car following her on her way home, which made her feel uneasy. To test her suspicion, she turned onto different streets, but the car behind her kept following. Frightened, she drove to the local police station and parked, hoping the stalker would leave her alone. When she didn't see the car anymore, she drove home. However, she soon saw the car again, so she returned to the police station parking lot and waited in her car for a while before driving home. Lori initially thought it was a prank, but she didn't report the incident to the police. On January 5th, Lori and her friend Jody arrived at the college for a dance team rehearsal. Lori recognized the same light blue car that had been following her, and she saw the driver, 23-year-old Justin Thurber, who was a local resident. Although Lori didn't know Justin personally, she had seen him with his older brother and friends before. After practice, Lori and Jody planned to meet up later, but Jody never showed up. It was then revealed that several dance team members had also seen Justin lurking around the college campus that week. In the initial stages of the investigation into Jody's disappearance, police searched the city thoroughly but couldn't find her car within the first 24 hours. The city of Arkansas is surrounded by open fields and wooded areas, making it a challenging task. To aid their search, authorities brought in a fixed-wing aircraft to scour the region from above. They hoped to spot Jody's car, which was larger and easier to detect than a person. The police investigation revealed that the last signal from Jody's cell phone was received from a tower near the Caw Wildlife Area, a vast wooded region along the Arkansas River. At this point, only one suspect had emerged, Justin Eugene Justin, identified by Lori Leglider and other members of the dance group. Notably, Justin was already familiar to the police due to a prior incident in 2004 when he was charged with illegal possession of banned substances despite his young age. Justin was sentenced but didn't serve time in prison. Instead, he was released. However, just 3 months later, he was arrested again for stealing in Probate Nation, violating his probation. In October 2005, he was charged with disorderly conduct. 3 months after that, he was arrested for petty theft and found with illegal drugs. Then, on December 31, 2006, just 6 days before Jody's disappearance, Justin was arrested for theft once more. After posting a $3,000 bail, Justin was freed on New Year's Eve. The very next day, January 1st, he He pretended to be a police officer, causing a public disturbance. When the real police arrived, Justin claimed to have chest pain and was taken to the hospital rather than the police station. It's unclear why he wasn't arrested after being discharged from the hospital, and it's also unclear how he managed to avoid consequences for his actions. A family tie to Cowley County Police might have influenced events. On January 6th, an officer spotted Justin's Cadillac at his parents' house and initiated a conversation. Justin's father invited the officer in. When questioned about his previous day's whereabouts, Justin said he drove to Winfield, 13 miles outside Arkansas City that morning. In Winfield, Justin met up with a friend and two acquaintances of his friend, whom he didn't know well. The four of them then drove around the countryside in one of the acquaintances' cars until it became stuck on a dirt road near Cedar Vale. Justin claimed that he proceeded to walk towards Arkansas City, a 30-mile journey from Cedar Vale. After 6 hours of walking, he grew tired and called his father to come pick him up. Justin's father backed his son's story, saying he'd picked him up near Cali State Fishing Lake, where Justin was wet and dirty. The officer found the story unconvincing, but lacked evidence to charge him, so let him go. That evening, police questioned Alexis Schwartzel, who had recently ended her 3-year relationship with Justin Thurber. When informed about the investigation into Jody Sanderholm's disappearance, Alexis was shocked. She revealed that Justin had once told her that he had been watching Jody since he was 13 years old, often sneaking peeks at her while she swam in her backyard pool, and even peered through her bedroom window, waiting for her to change clothes. Alexis explained that she had broken up with Justin due to his abusive behavior and increasing strange tendencies. She recalled that during intimate moments, he would choke her until she lost consciousness. Moreover, he would ask her to fight him, as it was the only way he could become aroused. The police grew increasingly suspicious of Justin's involvement in Jody's disappearance, despite lacking concrete evidence. Nonetheless, Justin was arrested later that evening, on January 6th. Detective Eric Mata arrested Justin Thurber for bail violation and criminal trespassing because Justin was found on the college campus, which the detective believed he was not supposed to be on. Justin requested to speak with his lawyer when arrested. Around the same time, police officers arrived at Justin's parents' house with a search warrant. During the search, the officers took Justin's shoes, which were wet and drying on a towel. His father had helped him clean the mud from the shoes. The clothes he wore when his father picked him up were also found, but Justin had already washed them. On January 7th, rugged terrain search teams combed the Caw Wildlife Area for Jody Sanderholm, finding shoe prints matching Justin's and smaller ones. They stopped for the night, resuming the search the next day. En route home, searchers checked Cowley County State Fishing Lake, recalling Justin was wet when picked up by his father. Near a public restroom, investigators discovered several important pieces of evidence. This included a muddy tire track, shoe prints with mud on them, and a portable toilet containing a handwritten note addressed to the parents of Jody Sanderholm. In another toilet, they found dance shoes and a flip-flop sandal that matched the footprints found at the Caw Wildlife Area. Further searches yielded a collection of personal belongings, including cut-off sweatshorts, a wallet with Jody's driver's license and social security card, a black leotard, a tigerette jacket with her first name on it, a vehicle floor mat, and a car seat cushion. Search efforts focused on Cowley County State Fishing Lake and the Caw Wildlife Area. On January 9th, specialists used sonar to locate Jody's submerged car. Tragically, her body was found later that day, hidden under debris. DNA evidence linked Justin Thurber to the car and body, but water in the car likely destroyed additional evidence. Forensic investigators found crucial evidence after many hours of work. A hair on Jody's car seat was matched to Justin Thurber through mitochondrial DNA testing. Private DNA expert Barbara Leal analyzed samples from Jody's arm and chest. It was possible that Justin was involved. Cell tower data showed Jody's and Justin's phones were in the same area simultaneously. This was corroborated by Jody's friend Lori, who saw Justin in the college parking lot that day. Security footage confirmed Lori's account, showing Justin following Jody in his Cadillac. Investigators believe that Justin followed Jody from college to her home, where he attacked her after she retrieved letters from the mailbox. A shoe print identical to Justin's sneakers was found by the mailbox, supporting this theory. Footprints matching Justin's shoes were discovered at the Caw Wildlife Area, and smaller prints matched Jody's shoes found at the lake, along with her other belongings. In the preserve, searchers found footprints of Justin and Jody side by side, indicating they walked together at one point. However, Jody's footprints stopped and Justin's continued deeper into the woods, so he carried her further on his own. His shoe prints were also found near where the body was discovered. Moreover, the three people Justin claimed to have been with on the day of Jody's disappearance denied his story, revealing that his alibi about getting stuck near Cedar Vale was a lie. The police drove Justin to Cedar Vale to verify his alibi, but he couldn't pinpoint the location where he claimed his car was stuck. Back at the police station, Justin agreed to take a polygraph test and requested that his relative, Chad Monroe, who worked for the Cowley County Sheriff's Office, be present during the questioning. The collected evidence was sufficient to indict Justin Thurber. Despite his denial of guilt, the judge set his bail at $1 million. Justin's lawyers attempted to argue that he was mentally incompetent, but their efforts were unsuccessful. Given that Justin had graduated from high school and attended college, the judge deemed the defense's claim of mental retardation unproven. The medical examiner who performed the autopsy testified in court, describing the brutal nature of Jody's last hours. Her body and face were covered in bruises and abrasions, with clear signs of strangulation on her neck, which was ultimately determined to be the cause of her death. Here's what the medical examiner found during the autopsy. The crime was driven by sexual desire and involved an object, a stick. To give you an idea of what happened at the wildlife area without going into detail, it's worth noting that not all violent criminals are as brutal as Justin. At Justin's trial, 7 women, including his ex-girlfriend, testified that they had been stalked by him. One of these women was a co-worker who was so afraid of Justin that she had to have a police officer escort her to her car after work because she had seen him waiting for her earlier. He had left a disturbing gift on her car, a rose, and a note saying he was interested in her. Multiple witnesses reported seeing Jody Sanderholm's car on January 5, 2007. Carrie Morris, a friend of Jody's, saw Jody sitting in the passenger seat of her car as they drove past each other in Arkansas City around noon. Morris noticed that the driver was a large man. She tried to call Jody's cell phone, but there was no answer. Later that day, around 3 p.m., 2 other women reported seeing a car that looked similar to Jody's on a dirt road south of Arkansas City. One of the women identified the driver as Justin in court. After a trial, the jury delivered a unanimous verdict on February 17, 2009, finding Justin guilty on all counts. They recommended that he be sentenced to death. Justin's lawyer attempted to negotiate a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but Jody's family opposed it. The judge ultimately sentenced Justin to death by lethal injection in March 2009. In 2008, Kansas expanded its stalking laws, increasing police authority and the definition of stalking behaviors. Since his sentencing, Justin Thurber has continued to appeal the court's decision. His lawyers are now arguing that he has a mental disability, which they claim is supported by evidence from 2018. However, the Kansas Supreme Court has put his death sentence on hold, citing a U.S. Supreme Court ruling that prohibits the execution of individuals with developmental disabilities, even if they are mild. Justin was found competent at his original trial. Years later, Jody's mother, Cindy Sanderholm, attended a hearing and was outraged that Justin had written letters to girls while in prison, seeing it as proof of his competency. Justin is currently appealing a death sentence, and a 2020 state law gives him the opportunity to request an attorney to assist with post-conviction DNA testing from the Cali County District Court. This is significant because, despite it being 16 years since Jodi Sanderholm's murder, the case is still not fully resolved. Additionally, the speaker believes that Jodi pleaded for her life, but Justin did not spare her, denying her a second chance. Kansas reinstated the death penalty in 1994, but no one has been executed since then. In fact, the last execution in Kansas took place in 1965. Since the reinstatement, 10 people, including Justin, have been sentenced to death, but none of their sentences have been carried out. According to Adam Fan and Steele, spokesperson for the Kansas Department of Corrections, there are no plans for future executions. Jennifer Aldridge, Jodi's sister, finds it surprising that Kansas reinstated the death penalty over 20 years ago without a plan for carrying out executions. She believes this issue should have been discussed when the penalty was reinstated. Even if Justin's death sentence is upheld, it is likely that it will not be carried out. Justin Thurber is currently being held at the maximum security El Dorado Correctional Facility in Butler County, Kansas. According to a 2014 report by the Kansas Legislative Post-Audit Committee, it costs almost $49,000 per year to keep an inmate in administrative segregation at El Dorado. Furthermore, it's not just the cost of housing a death row inmate, it's also 4 times more expensive to prosecute a case where the death penalty is sought by the prosecution. The Sanderholms feel that paying taxes is an additional unfair burden on top of the emotional pain they're already enduring as they wait for justice in their daughter Jodi's case. Brian Sanderholm explained, "Every week, when I see the taxes deducted from my paycheck, it's a painful reminder that I'm supporting the person responsible for our suffering." His wife Cindy echoed his sentiments, saying, "He deserves the maximum punishment, which is what the law intended. We need to reform the law so it can be enforced effectively." If you were in our shoes, what would you want to happen to someone who harmed your child? Cynthia Ann Sanderholm, Jodi's mother, sadly passed away on December 2, 2022, at the age of 63. The case of Drew Shoden. Drew Katrina Shoden was born on September 26, 1981, in Minneapolis, Minnesota, to Alan and Linda Shoden. She had an older brother, Sven. When Drew was 3, her parents divorced, but they remained on good terms. Her mother later married Sid Walker, a travel agent, and they raised Drew and her brother in a comfortable home on Whitefish Lake, a scenic vacation spot in Minnesota. Throughout high school, Drew excelled academically, earning honors and developed a passion for golf and art. Her true love was art, and her room was filled with her sketches of rock stars, models, and friends. After graduating from high school, Drew attended the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks. Those who knew her described her as a lively and caring person who loved to help others. She enjoyed traveling and exploring the country, with a dream of visiting Australia. In fact, she had plans to travel there in the spring of 2004. Before the event, Drew had 2 part-time jobs to save money. She worked as a sales associate at Victoria's Secret and as a waitress at a nightclub in Grand Forks. On Saturday, November 22, 2003, Drew finished her 4 p.m. shift at Victoria's Secret in Columbia Mall. She then went shopping and bought a purse from a store. After shopping, Drew walked to her car in the parking lot and called her boyfriend, Chris Lang. During the call, Drew suddenly said, okay, and their connection was lost. Chris didn't think much of it since their conversation wasn't important, so he didn't call her back. About 3 hours later, Chris's phone rang again. When he answered, he only heard the sound of wind and phone buttons beeping. In a later television interview, Chris recalled his thoughts when the call with Drew was interrupted. At the time, he didn't sense any urgency and didn't imagine that something terrible was happening. He thought it was just a typical cell phone disconnection. It wasn't until later that he realized the call had been cut off for a much more sinister reason. Drew didn't show up for work at a nightclub, causing her colleagues to worry. Around the same time, her friend and roommate Meg Murphy got a call from the nightclub asking about Drew's whereabouts. Meg didn't know where Drew was and started searching for her by contacting their mutual friends and the local hospital, but she didn't find any leads. By 9 p.m., with no progress, Meg contacted the police, telling them that Drew worked at Columbia Mall. The police sent an officer to the mall, but it was already closed by the time they arrived. While searching the parking lot, the officer found Drew's car. When they inspected the vehicle, they discovered it was unlocked and showed no signs of a struggle or any evidence of a crime. However, they did find a black knife sheath on the ground near the car. The car's interior showed no evidence of theft, with personal belongings including papers, a wallet, and a newly purchased purse still on the seat, indicating that robbery was unlikely to be a motive for any trouble Drew might have encountered. With Drew's friends, boyfriend, and parents unaware of her whereabouts, investigators suspected a possible kidnapping. The investigation initially focused on Chris Lang as the prime suspect, but he was quickly ruled out after it was confirmed that he had a solid alibi, having been 300 miles away in Minnesota at the time of the incident. The police obtained information from Chris about 2 phone calls he had with Drew. The first call was suddenly cut off, and the second call, which took place a few hours later, picked up background noises, including wind sounds and button pressing. The investigators went to the mall where Drew worked the next day to review the security footage. Although there were no cameras in the parking lot where Drew's car was parked, there were multiple cameras inside the mall. Upon reviewing the footage, detectives found a clip of Drew entering a store after her shift. At 4:55 p.m., she calmly purchased a purse, wearing a pink sweater and holding a jacket. After paying, she put on her jacket and left the store, calling Chris on her way out. This call was made at exactly 5 p.m. As we know, their conversation was suddenly interrupted at 5:04 p.m. after Drew said, "Okay." To recreate the events surrounding Drew's disappearance, a detective conducted an experiment. He set a timer for 4 minutes, the length of the interrupted call, and walked from the store where Drew bought her purse to the parking lot where her car was parked. When the timer went off, the detective had reached the parking lot near where Drew's car was found. This suggested that something must have happened to Drew while she was at her car. The investigation was hindered by the lack of surveillance cameras in the parking lot. Despite this challenge, Drew's disappearance generated widespread media attention, prompting a massive response from the public. Alongside the police, over 1,000 volunteers joined the search for Drew, and FBI officers were also involved in the investigation. Drew's last phone call was traced to Fisher, Minnesota, a 30-minute drive from her workplace. The surrounding area is rural, with vast fields. To search for clues, police used helicopters, all-terrain vehicles, horses, and dogs to scour the fields. They also asked local landowners to check their properties, but this initial search yielded no leads. As the investigation continued, the search area expanded daily. 4 days later, a boot was found under a bridge in Crookston, a small town about 30 miles from Grand Forks, where Drew vanished. Notably, a roommate remembered Drew wearing those boots on the day she disappeared. Forensic analysis later confirmed the boot belonged to Drew. In the Crookston area, further searches yielded no new leads, so the investigation turned its focus back to the Columbia Mall surveillance footage. This time, detectives scrutinized hundreds of hours of footage from various cameras, searching for signs of the abductor. They suspected that the person responsible might have been following Drew and could be visible in the footage. After hours of monitoring, the investigators identified a suspicious individual. The man was seen wandering aimlessly around the mall, not purchasing anything, and appeared more interested in observing the people around him than the products on sale. At 3:41 p.m., he sat down on a bench near the mall exit, continuing to watch people pass by. About 10 minutes later, he got up and walked away, wearing black gloves on his hands. After observing the man stand up and leave his seat, investigators made a crucial connection that he only did so when a blonde woman, pushing a grocery cart, walked by him and headed towards the parking lot. The detectives were convinced that this was not a mere coincidence, but rather the man had deliberately selected a potential target and was now following her. The police had no leads on the mysterious woman who was almost kidnapped at the mall, but Drew Shoden was the only person who vanished that day. Given their resemblance, it's possible the kidnapper had a specific type in mind, and so Drew was the next target. Drew left the mall around 5 p.m. when it was already dark, which could have made it easier for the perpetrator to strike. The investigation focused on 3 key locations: Grand Forks, where Drew was kidnapped; Fisher, where her phone was last active; and Crookston, where one of her shoes was found. The FBI reviewed the files of all registered sex offenders in these areas, comparing their photos to the image of the suspicious man from the mall. The only individual who fit the description was Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., a man with a criminal record marked by repeated offenses against women. Alfonso Rodriguez Jr., now 50, has spent 23 years in prison. He was born in Laredo, Texas, in 1953 to migrant worker parents. He was the second of 5 children. Rodriguez described his childhood as unhappy, citing his parents' excessive criticism and unreasonableness. For 15 years, his family moved from state to state before settling in Crookston in 1963. As he grew older, Rodriguez became increasingly isolated, partly due to language barriers. As a Spanish speaker, he struggled with English, making school challenging. He dropped out in the 9th grade and began working as a laborer at the American Crystal Sugar Company plant in Crookston. Rodriguez alleged that he was molested by older women during his youth, which he believed sparked his hostility towards women. In 1974, at 21, he asked a woman for a ride home, but instead took her to a driveway in Crookston, where he attacked her, grabbing her throat and trying to force her into submission. The following month, Rodriguez targeted another woman who was sitting in a parked truck outside a movie theater in Crookston. He threatened her with a knife and instructed her to follow him to a secluded rural area where he sexually assaulted her. In 1979, Rodriguez attempted to abduct a 69-year-old high school English teacher who was walking alone at night in Crookston. When he tried to force her into his car, she resisted. Enraged, Rodriguez stabbed her in the elbow and abdomen with a knife. Despite her injuries, she managed to escape and ran to safety. The teacher, who was also an skilled artist, created a composite sketch of Rodriguez that closely resembled him. This sketch ultimately led to his arrest. Rodriguez was found guilty of attempted kidnapping and aggravated assault, and he was sentenced to 23 years in prison. He served his sentence until his release in May 2003. Notably, Rodriguez was released from prison just 6 months before Drew's disappearance, and he was registered as a high-risk sex offender, indicating that he was likely to reoffend. Alfonso Rodriguez's family expressed concerns to the Minnesota Department of Corrections that he might revert to his old ways before his prison release. But he was released since he had served his full sentence. After his release, Rodriguez moved in with his mother in Crookston, near the bridge where Drew's shoe was found, which wasn't in his favor. Detectives questioned Rodriguez, who denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance. He claimed to have visited the Columbia Mall on the day she vanished, saying he watched the movie Once Upon a Time in Mexico at the movie theater. However, investigators discovered that no Grand Forks movie theaters were showing that film on that day. After searching Rodriguez's car, the police came to a sad realization: Drew was probably no longer alive. According to Grand Forks County Sheriff Dan Hill, the search had shifted from a rescue mission to a recovery effort. In the interior of Rodriguez's car, forensic experts discovered dark red stains in several areas, which were later confirmed to be Drew's blood. The blood was found on the rear passenger window, back seat, and 2 other areas in the passenger compartment. The DNA from the blood matched Drew's DNA, which was obtained from her toothbrush. A folding knife was found in the trunk of Rodriguez's car, which matched the sheath found in the parking lot near Drew's vehicle. A receipt showed that Rodriguez had purchased the knife and sheath from a nearby hardware store. Although Drew's body was not found, the evidence was sufficient to charge Rodriguez with her disappearance 8 days later. Rodriguez was arrested and held in a Grand Forks jail. He denied any involvement in Drew's disappearance and refused to cooperate with investigators. Despite the evidence against him, he refused to provide any information about Drew's whereabouts. During a brief bond hearing, his bail was set at $5 million. The search for Drew persisted despite the suspect's silence, focusing on 3 towns. However, the search was hampered by heavy, unprecedented snowfall in the area. To aid in the search, the governors of North Dakota and Minnesota held a press conference on December 9th, pledging to deploy several hundred National Guard members and state employees. North Dakota Governor John Hoeven expressed that Drew's disappearance had affected every North Dakotan, while Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty commended the community and police for their cooperation. Despite their efforts, no results were found, and the search was eventually suspended due to deteriorating weather conditions. When spring arrived, the search resumed with renewed intensity. As the winter snow began to melt, searchers hoped to finally find Drew after 5 long months. Unfortunately, it wasn't until April 17, 2004, that her body was discovered in a field in Crookston, just a few miles from where the boot was initially found. Drew's family was devastated when they received the heartbreaking news. Her father described the moment, saying that they had been waiting for that call, and when it came, it felt like time had stopped. This was their worst fear come true, and it would haunt them for the rest of their lives. The body was found in a field that had already been searched, but the large snowdrifts had concealed it. The circumstances of the crime were immediately apparent. Drew was naked from the waist down, her hands were tied behind her back, and a rope was around her neck. There were also signs of a plastic bag having been placed over her head before the rope was tied. DNA evidence linked to Rodriguez was found on Drew's jacket. An autopsy revealed that she had been subjected to a brutal beating and stabbing before her death. The medical examiner identified 3 possible causes of death: the neck wound, suffocation, or hypothermia. Drew Chaudin's family was finally able to say goodbye to her on April 24, 2004, after months of uncertainty. A mourning ceremony in North Dakota was attended by around 1,500 people. The crime involved both North Dakota and Minnesota, which made it a federal crime since Drew was taken across state lines. This meant the prosecutor's office could pursue the death penalty for Alfonso Rodriguez Jr. Rodriguez was found guilty of Drew's murder on August 30, 2006, and the jury recommended the death sentence. Judge Ralph Erickson sentenced him to death on February 8, 2007, citing the senseless and violent nature of his crime. Notably, Rodriguez became the first person to be sentenced to death in North Dakota in almost a century. However, even after 6 years on death row, Rodriguez refused to admit his guilt. It wasn't until June 28, 2013, that he finally confessed to kidnapping and killing Drew. But the story is not over yet. Ralph Erickson, a former district judge, became a U.S. Court of Appeals judge and later reversed his own decision that had sentenced Rodriguez to death. In 2021, he ordered a new sentencing phase, emphasized that Rodriguez's guilt was clear and question, confirmed by multiple DNA tests. The issue at hand is the appropriateness of the death penalty in this case. Erickson overturned the death sentence, citing 2 key reasons. Firstly, the defense attorneys failed to thoroughly investigate Rodriguez's mental health. Secondly, forensic expert Michael McGee's testimony was misleading. McGee claimed that Rodriguez had violated Drew's sexual integrity within 24 to 36 hours of her abduction, but there was no concrete evidence to support this, such as Rodriguez's seminal fluid on Drew's body. According to Erickson, McGee's opinion was not based on facts and misled him, influencing his original verdict. The case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine Williams. As a child, she was cheerful and close to her parents. However, as she grew older, Carly struggled with addiction to alcohol and illegal substances. Despite these challenges, she made efforts to overcome them. In 2014, at the age of 31, Carly lived in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia, with her two children, 7-year-old William and 3-year-old Cadence. On September 30, 2014, Carly's boyfriend, Sale, took her to Muswell Brook, where her daughter Cadence lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly spent a few hours with Cadence at Andrew's house, arriving around 12:30 p.m. Sale dropped her off but did not stay, agreeing to return later that day. However, when Sale came back to pick Carly up, she was no longer at Andrew's house. According to Andrew, Carly and he got into an argument, and she left, planning to walk to the nearby McDonald's restaurant, about 20 minutes away. Sale was surprised when Carly didn't call to let him know where to meet her, so he tried calling her instead. However, he couldn't reach her. Assuming she had said she was going to McDonald's, Sale drove there to look for her. Along the way, he kept an eye out for her, thinking she might be waiting somewhere. He considered the possibility that her phone was dead, but he couldn't find her anywhere. She wasn't at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale spent some time driving around Muswell Brook, but it was all in vain. Carly had seemingly vanished. When Carly failed to return home to Belmont that evening, Sale contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that their routine was always the same. He would drop her off, she would get out of the car, wave goodbye, and then call and text him twice to let him know she was safe. But on this particular day, things didn't go as usual. Sale dropped her off at 12:30 p.m., but never heard from her again. Despite trying to call and text her, the phone just rang out. A key question emerged. Did Carly leave her ex-partner Andrew Easton's house, or was he hiding something? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but no one else could confirm she actually left his house. The police questioned neighbors and people along the route Carly would have taken to get to McDonald's, but nobody reported seeing her. This lack of eyewitnesses only fueled suspicion about Andrew. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house to verify his claim that Carly left around 2 p.m. The police searched fields behind a nearby residential area, but the chief investigator reported that nothing significant was found. The investigation will continue, and the police are urging anyone with information about Carly's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen wearing blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, and carrying a tan handbag. Police investigators obtained a search warrant and thoroughly searched the house where Carly was last seen, looking for clues that could help explain her disappearance. Despite their efforts, they found no evidence of criminal activity or new leads. However, they did stumble upon a suspicious discovery. Carly's Facebook account had been deleted just a few hours after she went missing, and before anyone had even reported her disappearance to the authorities. This mysterious deletion sparked a lot of questions and prompted further investigation. 9 months after Carly's disappearance, her parents, Steve and Lorraine Williams, sought assistance in finding their daughter. With the help of Detective Timothy Amah, they made a public appeal, requesting any information that could aid in the case. During the appeal, Lorraine became emotional and pleaded for help, saying that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help them. The family has struggled since Carly's disappearance, with Steve and Lorraine explaining that their situation is complicated, particularly when it comes to Carly's children. The children have 2 different fathers, and the family has had limited contact with them. Steve and Lorraine hope that this will change, allowing them to reconnect with their grandchildren. Lorraine expressed the deep sorrow of Carly's children, who would never again experience their mother's loving kisses, warm hugs, and laughter. They were unable to say goodbye, and their memories were frozen in time. She described the family's pain and frustration, feeling trapped in limbo, and emphasized their need to find Carly and give her dignity and respect in death. Carly's children, William and Cadence, needed to know what happened to their mother to heal and move forward, free from the burden of pain and uncertainty. Lorraine begged for the truth, expressing that while her daughter was gone, her children needed closure and justice. She implored the responsible person to come forward, break their silence, and let the family find peace. The police shifted their focus to Sale Newson, another possible suspect, as they were unable to connect Carly's disappearance to her ex-partner, Andrew Easton. Investigations revealed that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled. Sale was extremely jealous, which often sparked their arguments, despite their relatively short time together. Although Sale publicly claimed to be deeply in love with Carly, saying she was the first woman he had loved in 14 years, his actions told a different story. He started intimate relationships with other women almost immediately, even offering sex to several women just hours after reporting Carly missing. On October 2nd, just 2 days after Carly's disappearance, Sale spent the night with another woman, yet in public, he pretended to be grief-stricken over losing the love of his life. Detectives also learned that Sale and Carly had an argument 2 days before she vanished, triggered by Facebook messages from other men. However, while this evidence was suspicious, it was still circumstantial, and the police needed more concrete evidence to bring charges against Sale Newson. In 2015, authorities searched 3 properties in Muswellbrook and Scone, Est-Ouest, seizing 3 firearms, illegal substances, and arresting 24-year-old James Canine, unrelated to Carly's disappearance, but a notable name in the investigation. 2 years after, on September 30, 2014, the police investigation had stalled with no new leads. But on August 7, 2016, a major breakthrough came when 2 pedestrians stumbled upon human remains in a shallow grave in a bush off the road near Scone. Forensic analysis confirmed that the remains were indeed those of Carly McBride. The police waited 4 days before announcing the discovery, hoping to gather more evidence. Carly's parents, who are still grieving, are asking the public to come forward with any information they might have. They are thankful for the help that led to finding their daughter's body, but they still want to know who was responsible for her disappearance and are seeking closure. Over 10 months, investigators probed a case leading to Sale Newson's arrest warrant on June 19, 2017. After his arrest, Newson denied involvement in Carly McBride's death. Authorities also charged James Canine, 26, for helping Newson dispose of the body. The 3 knew each other from a rehab center for addicts, staying in touch despite leaving at different times. The trial of Sale Newson began in 2018 and lasted for years due to limited evidence. Prosecutors claimed Newson attacked Carly in a jealous rage, causing her death. Forensic experts found she died from multiple blunt force trauma, including 23 skull fractures and 13 torso and spinal fractures. The judge ruled Newson's actions caused Carly's death, noting he had claimed to be a skilled mixed martial arts fighter with 20 undefeated fights. The judge concluded Carly died from severe brain trauma caused by a high degree of force to the head, likely inflicted by Newson's fists, feet, or objects. During a search of Newson's house, police found a map in a shoebox under the bed with a circle around Muswellbrook and Scone, where Carly's remains were later found. The map also had numbers 1, 2, and 3 written on it, which a senior constable linked to point-to-point cameras. Newson mentioned to Carly's father that the skeleton was missing hand bones, a detail only known to the police, Carly's parents, and the forensic medicine department. This suggested Newson was familiar with the crime scene and had left Carly's body there. The clothes on the remains matched what she wore on the day she disappeared, indicating she died soon after leaving her partner's house. The police couldn't find her purse and phone. When police searched Newson's mobile phone, they discovered he had deleted Google location services between September 18th and October 2nd, 2014. During the trial, The investigators learned that the photo of Carly, which Newson took on the way to Muswell Brook and later used in missing person flyers, was edited and cropped even before the police received the report of Carly missing. When the search for Carly began, Newson offered a $20,000 reward for information about her whereabouts. However, his bank account showed he was broke, which meant he offered the reward only because he knew no one would ever find her. Thus, he wouldn't have to pay. Newson injected himself into the police investigation from the start, trying to deflect suspicion onto others and attempting to get information about where police and other emergency services would be searching. He also conducted a canvass of the neighboring streets, searching for CCTV or witnesses, which police said was done not to find information, but to suppress it and to determine if anyone had seen him intercepting Ms. McBride. While volunteers and police searched for her around Muswell Brook and handed out missing person flyers, Newson was in Sydney messaging friends about how he was driving an Audi R8. The more investigators dug into Newson, interviewed him, looked at his Facebook messages, listened to his phone calls. After examining his internet search history, investigators discovered that he was looking for information on how to delete a Facebook account. His account remained active, but Carly's account got deleted shortly after. Although all the evidence was circumstantial, the prosecutors said they did have puzzle pieces that began to reveal a picture when put together. Eventually, these pieces turned into an irrefutable case, ruling out any other possible explanations for how Carly McBride disappeared and how her body was about 82 feet from the side of the road. The judge found that Newson's motive for suddenly and violently attacking Carly was jealousy. Newson had gone to pick Carly up from Muswell Brook, expecting her to have spent time with her daughter as planned. Instead, he discovered she had met her ex-partner for 90 minutes. This revelation allegedly triggered a fit of jealousy in Newson, leading him to brutally attack Carly. Carly's mother, Lorraine Williams, recounted the immense grief and anxiety she experienced during a 2-year wait for justice. A wait that ended with the devastating realization that her happy and outgoing daughter would never come home to her 2 young children. When she finally saw Carly again, it was in the morgue, an experience she described as the worst day of her life. In December 2021, 43-year-old Newson was found guilty and sentenced to 27 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2038, nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing. Despite the guilty verdict, Newson maintained his innocence, stating to the judge. Newson's accomplice, James Callahan, also denied his involvement but was found guilty by a jury in July 2022. The judge determined that Callahan had lied to police 3 times to create a false alibi for Newson and deleted phone data to conceal his actions. At the time of his involvement in the Carly McBride case, Callahan was already in prison for illegal weapons possession and prohibited substances. In November 2022, he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison with a 4-year parole period, showing little reaction to the news. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed relief that justice had been served, but they also acknowledged that no matter the outcome, they would never be able to get their daughter back. The case of Corey Desmond. Corey Desmond was born on March 18, 1980, at Torrance Memorial Hospital, where she immediately faced a life-or-death struggle due to a hole in her diaphragm. Despite the odds against her, Corey underwent multiple surgeries and defied a 20% chance of survival, not only recovering but thriving as well. Those who knew Corey described her as a bright, self-assured young woman who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. She was energetic, affectionate, and cared deeply for many people. After graduating from North Torrance High School, Corey earned a master's degree in criminal justice from Long Beach State. However, she later changed her mind and decided to pursue a teaching career. Sadly, Corey's life was cut short, but just a week after her passing, A notice arrived in the mail, confirming that she had earned her teaching credential. Corey was loved by many and had a special gift for connecting with people. Corey had formed close bonds with her coworkers at various bars and restaurants, which made her want to continue working in the industry despite her family's disapproval. On Saturday, February 14, 2009, Corey finished her shift at a bar at 9:30 p.m. and walked 2 blocks to Street Lounge, a popular bar where many of her friends worked. Surveillance cameras captured her helping out her friends at the bar until it closed around 2 a.m. After that, none of her friends saw her again. 2 days later, on Monday, February 16th, at around 2:20 p.m., the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office received a call from a driver who was about 100 miles away from the bar where Corey was last seen. The driver had stopped to remove snow chains from his tires when he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor. Initially, he thought it was from an animal that had been hit by a car, but he decided to investigate. A short distance from his car, he found a black plastic garbage bag containing a woman's body. Panicked, the driver ran into the road, flagging down cars and asking someone to call the police, as his phone was out of PIN. The victim, 28-year-old Corey Day Desmond, was identified through fingerprints and her driver's license. She had suffered a brutal attack, dying from strangulation, with multiple bruises on her face and neck, and head injuries. Despite her efforts to fight back, evident from defense wounds, she succumbed to the assault. Although the exact time of death couldn't be determined, experts estimated that Corey's body had been lying on the street for 12 to 36 hours before it was discovered. Notably, her pants were found unbuttoned and pulled down to her knees, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. Investigators concluded that the location where the body was found was not the site of the murder. The killer likely dumped Corey's body by the side of the road and hoping it would take time for it to be discovered. Before the police found her body, a rainstorm had washed away any potential evidence. Breaking the news to families of the deceased or missing is one of the toughest parts of a policeman's job. The news of Corey's body being discovered in a garbage bag was devastating for her grandmother, with whom Corey was living, and just as shocking for Mark, Corey's father. Mark was well aware of how the system worked and knew that investigations could be delayed for months due to the need for warrants for searches, interrogations, and fingerprinting. He also knew that bureaucratic red tape could slow down the process of solving a crime. Instead of waiting for the police to find Corey's killer, Mark decided to take matters into his own hands. Driven by his love for his daughter, Mark began searching for the person responsible. He discovered Corey's abandoned Jeep Wrangler in an alley near the bar where she worked. He also learned that Corey had gone missing on the night of February 15th, although no one had realized it at the time. Corey's grandmother hadn't been alarmed because Corey was an adult and could have stayed overnight at a friend's house. To piece together the events of the evening, investigators visited the bar where Corey worked as a waitress. They spoke with her coworkers, who revealed that Corey had finished her shift at 9:30 p.m. and then headed to another bar where her friends were working. This was a common routine for Corey, as she would often socialize with her friends and even lend a hand at the bar, earning extra tips in the process. Many regulars at the bar recognized Corey and thought she was a part of the staff. Security cameras confirmed this account, capturing footage of Corey assisting her friends behind the counter. However, on this evening, Corey's luck took a turn for the worse. She got into an argument with a drunk and disorderly man who was making inappropriate comments and inappropriately touching women. When a disruptive man showed up at the bar, Corey stood up for the other patrons and told him he wasn't welcome. The man became furious, but eventually agreed to leave. Corey went back to helping her friends and serving drinks as if nothing had happened, and even though she drank some alcohol that evening, it didn't seem to affect her behavior. After 2 a.m., Corey left the bar alone, planning to head home. But tragically, Her body was found 100 miles away the next day. Mark helped the police by sharing any information he could find on TV and appealed to others to come forward with any crucial details. Meanwhile, the police identified the man who had gotten into a fight with Corey before her death. When questioned by investigators, the man claimed not to know Corey Desmond, but admitted to having a big fight with a woman at a bar on February 14th. He blamed his behavior on alcohol, saying it made him lose control, and confirmed that he was kicked out of the bar afterwards and went home to sleep. The man denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to take a polygraph test and let the police search his house and car. The investigators thoroughly searched the suspect's car, looking for any signs of evidence, such as bloodstains, hair, or personal belongings of Corey. Despite the car being dirty inside and out, forensic experts found nothing. They also searched his house, but found no indication of his involvement in the crime. The police then turned to a polygraph test as their last hope to catch the suspect, but he passed it easily, answering all their questions. His wife corroborated his alibi, stating that he returned home before 2 a.m. and went straight to bed. Since Corey left the bar around 2 a.m., it seemed clear that this man was not involved in her death. Consequently, the police removed him from their list of suspects, but they were left with no other leads or persons of interest in the investigation. Investigators looked into her personal life to see if she had any enemies who might have wanted to harm her. They discovered a strange detail. Corey had stopped by the bar where she worked to ask to use the restroom, but the owner refused since the bar was closed and told her to go home. This was around 2:20 a.m., but what happened after that remains unknown because Corey never got in her car and didn't go home. The investigators thought that Corey might have been abducted or attacked near her workplace, but the bar's security cameras didn't capture anything, and there were no witnesses on the street at that late hour. When Corey died, her blood alcohol level was more than 4 times the legal limit for driving, but it's unclear whether she was planning to drive or looking for another way to get home. Unfortunately, Corey didn't encounter anyone who could help her that night. A month into the investigation, the police had checked all leads and found no new suspects, reaching a dead end. However, Corey's father, Mark, was not ready to give up. He rented 3 billboards on Aria Boulevard in Redondo Beach. Information about Corey was displayed on 50 electronic billboards, which eventually led to a breakthrough in the case. In May 2009, the police received a call from a woman named Tiffany who had seen Corey's photo on one of the billboards. Tiffany's tip helped the police solve the case. She was clearly nervous and upset, speaking quietly and rambling at first. However, she eventually composed herself and explained that she thought her boyfriend, Tony Lopez Perez, might have killed Corey Desmond. She added that he had been acting strangely and that she would like to talk to them more about it in person. Tiffany arranged to meet with the detective in a park where she shared her suspicions. She told him that on Valentine's Day, she and Tony had planned a romantic dinner. She spent the evening getting ready, dropping off her kids at her parents' house, getting her hair done, and buying a new red dress, which Tony particularly liked. Tony was working that day, but was supposed to come home around 11:30 p.m. Tiffany waited up for Tony all night, but he didn't respond to her calls and messages. When he finally returned home at 4:30 a.m., he claimed to be too drunk to drive and said he had fallen asleep in his car. Tiffany found this suspicious, especially since Tony rarely cleaned his car, but afterwards, he suddenly bought cleaning products and washed the car thoroughly, refusing her help. A few days later, Tony sold his white Dodge for a low price and bought a new car without explanation. He also changed his phone number for no apparent reason. On their trip to Big Bear Lake, Tony's behavior seemed normal at first, but then he stopped the car and asked Tiffany if she thought the body of a murdered bartender had been dumped there. He seemed certain that the police had found her body in that exact location. Tony Lopez Perez and Tiffany had lived together for about 4 years and had a 6-year-old son, but they were never married. Tony was a hard-working and well-liked man with no criminal record. He came from a large family with 8 siblings, and his parents had grown up in the LA area. Tony had attended high school in Manhattan Beach. However, after Corey Desmond's death, Tiffany began to notice some suspicious behavior from Tony. He was absent on the day of Corey's death, and later he was seen cleaning his car urgently and trying to sell it quickly. He also made a strange comment about where the police found Corey's body. Additionally, he changed his phone number and displayed odd behavior. When Tiffany connected these dots, she realized that Tony might be involved in Corey's death. She was hesitant to believe it, but she agreed to cooperate with the investigators. They decided to interview Tony at his house, making it seem like a routine witness inquiry into Corey's case. Tiffany played along, not revealing to Tony that she suspected him. During the interview, Tony appeared calm and composed, answering questions without showing any nervousness. He claimed he didn't know Corey, saying he had only seen her in the newspapers. To gather enough evidence to arrest Tony Lopez Perez for Corey's murder, the police needed concrete proof. They tracked down the new owner of the Dodge that Tony had sold quickly after Corey's death was reported. The new owner confirmed that Tony had sold him the car at a suspiciously low price and allowed the police to search the vehicle for clues. Tiffany revealed that Tony had thoroughly cleaned the interior before selling it, but the police discovered something incriminating when they used luminol and an ultraviolet lamp to examine the car. This revealed why Tony had been to get rid of his car. The police arrested Tony and took him to the station, without revealing what they had discovered. Initially, Tony denied knowing Corey, but later changed his story, claiming he had seen her outside a bar and whistled at her. However, when the police showed him photos of a car he had sold, which contained crucial evidence, Tony's story changed again. This time, Tony claimed that Corey had become unconscious on the sidewalk outside the bar. He said he tried to help her, but she woke up screaming and told him to leave her alone. Tony alleged that, in fear, he covered her mouth and accidentally strangled her. Panicked that he would be blamed for Corey's death, Tony placed her body in the back seat of his car and drove home. He said he woke up in the middle of the night, checked on the body, and realized it wasn't just a nightmare. The next morning, Tony went to work with Corey's body still in the car. After his shift, he put the body in 2 garbage bags and abandoned it in a remote area. Tony claimed that he accidentally strangled Corey while drunk and scared, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Corey's injuries were severe, including head wounds, facial and neck bruises, and defensive wounds on her hands. Her pants were also found down to her knees, implying a more deliberate and violent act. Tony was arrested and charged with first-degree deprivation of life. He led the police to Corey's body the next day. The investigation produced DNA evidence, which matched Corey's blood to blood found in the car Tony sold shortly after the crime. At the 2011 trial, Coroner Jack Sheraton testified to the extent of Corey's injuries, including multiple head contusions, signs of strangulation, and blunt force trauma to her face. He also found scratches on her body, indicating that the killer had dragged her after death. Prosecutors argued that Tony had assaulted Corey, attempting to force her into sexual intimacy in the early morning of February 15, 2009. When Corey resisted, Tony strangled her. Tiffany Ware, a former girlfriend of Tony's, testified at the trial, revealing that Tony had an insatiable appetite for sex in January and February 2009. Despite their frequent daily sexual encounters, Perez remained unsatisfied. Additionally, Tiffany revealed to the court that Tony had forced himself on her without her consent on 2 separate occasions. These incidents took place about a month apart, shortly after the birth of their son. On both occasions, Tiffany was unconscious on the couch, having taken painkillers for severe back pain. Perez spoke to the court for the first time during his sentencing. He acknowledged that he had strayed from the values of love and respect he was taught, which normally made him a caring father, uncle and family provider. He admitted that he failed to live up to these principles and fell short. Perez largely stuck to the version of events presented by his lawyer, Andrew Hanel, during the trial. According to Hanel, Perez found the victim, Corey, unconscious on the sidewalk and tried to calm her down, but didn't intend to harm her. Perez expressed regret, saying that he should have taken a moment to think before acting. Instead, he let fear take over and acted carelessly. Corey's father, Mark Desmond, mourned the loss of his 28-year-old daughter, who had a promising future ahead of her. He condemned Perez, saying that he not only took Corey's life, but also crushed the hopes and dreams of his own children. Mark Desmond described Perez as embodying the characteristics that women often fear in society. Before being sentenced, Perez asked God in court to show him mercy and apologized to both the Desmond family and his own family for causing them harm. He acknowledged that his actions would have a lasting impact on the Desmond family's lives. Desmond's grandmother, Beverly, expressed her desire for Perez to never be released from prison and to suffer as much as her granddaughter had. In July 2011, a jury found Tony Lopez Perez guilty of first-degree deprivation of life, resulting in a life imprisonment sentence with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Corey Desmond's family thanked Tiffany, whose information helped the police solve the case. A family friend, Leslie Schwab, attended the trial and credited Tiffany with helping the police catch Perez, saying that without her, they might not have identified him as the perpetrator. The case of Alicia Canales McGuire. Alicia was born on October 29, 1992, in Mount Vernon, Washington, to Manuel and Michelle Canales. Her passion was helping others, which led her to work as a caregiver for most of her adult life. Growing up on a farm, Alicia learned the value of hard work from a young age. Starting to work at just 5 years old, she often returned to the family farm to lend a hand. Spending time with her family was crucial to Alicia, and she made it a point to regularly visit and call them, always remembering to express her love when saying goodbye. Alicia lived in Birdsview with her husband Bradle. Alicia lived in the house her sister Amanda's home, where Amanda lived with her 3 children. When Amanda had to travel to New York for work, she asked Alicia to watch her kids during her absence. Alicia was happy to help care for her nephew and nieces. One night, a nanny staying in the house with her called 911 after waking up to the sound of gunshots. When the nanny went downstairs, she found Alicia lying motionless at the front door. The police officers who arrived at the scene first secured the house to ensure the perpetrator was not still inside. They carefully checked every room, confirming that only the nanny and the children were present. Once the children were safely removed from the house, the police began searching for evidence. A car was parked in front of the house, with shell casings nearby, indicating that the shooter had stood next to the car right before the front door. Several bullets had hit the door frame, and Alicia's body was lying face down just outside the door. The police found no signs of a robbery, as the house was not in disarray, and it appeared that the perpetrator had not entered the house at all. The detectives were left wondering who would want to kill Alicia and why. When they discovered that the crime scene was her sister's house, they considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Maybe Amanda, Alicia's sister, was the intended target, but she was safely in New York at the time. The investigators turned to the nanny, who was also in the house during the shooting, for answers. After calming down, she was able to provide some information. She told them that she was upstairs when she heard the gunshots, and when she looked down, she saw Alicia lying face down on the floor, motionless. Unfortunately, she didn't see the shooter. She mentioned that Amanda, Alicia's sister, had issues with her ex-husband, Kevin Lewis. Upon reviewing reports from the local sheriff's office, the detectives discovered that this was not the first call to the address, with all previous incidents related to domestic disputes between Amanda and Kevin Lewis. The detectives focus on this particular testimony. They located Kevin Lewis's home address in another part of Everett and paid him a visit before dawn. His house was dark, and when they knocked on the door, Kevin answered. During their conversation, the officers asked if he knew where his ex-wife was, and he replied that she should be at home. Appearing disheveled as if he had just woken up, the detectives asked Kevin to account for his whereabouts the previous night. He claimed to have stayed at home and stated that his sister and mother could vouch for his alibi. Notably, he didn't ask why the detectives were visiting him. When detectives told Kevin that a shooting had occurred at the house where his children lived, he showed no emotional response, which was unusual. As a parent, he should have asked about his children's well-being, but he remained silent. However, when they informed him that Amanda was out of town on business, he expressed surprise, saying "really," and the conversation ended there. The detectives decided to investigate further by reviewing footage from surveillance cameras at neighboring houses. They wanted to verify Kevin's alibi that he had stayed home all night. They saw a car stopped near Kevin's driveway about 40 minutes before the attack on Alicia. A person resembling Kevin then exited the house, got into the car, and drove away a few moments later. Although the footage was not clear enough to confirm it was definitely Kevin, the detectives continued to review additional camera footage. They took a closer look at the car, but that didn't help identify it. All they could determine was that it was a light-colored vehicle. They fast-forwarded the recording and saw the car return about 20 minutes later. This time, they noticed a crucial detail. The front right rim was different from the others. While the three other rims were light in color, the front right one was dark. The car stopped near Kevin Lewis's house, and the same person who had gotten out of the car earlier got out again and went back inside. Whoever this person was, they entered the house about 20 minutes before the 911 calls about a shooting started coming in. After that, the car left and didn't come back. Since it was a 15-minute drive from Kevin's house to Amanda's house, it's possible that the car had enough time to get to Amanda's place. However, it was too early to say whether this car was involved in the shooting at all. Amanda found out about her sister's death a few hours later, when their father called her in New York to break the news. When investigators asked Amanda, a key witness, if she thought her ex-husband Kevin was responsible for Alicia's murder, she was adamant that he was the one. Although Amanda's 8-year marriage to Kevin Lewis ended, she struggled to acknowledge the toxic nature of their relationship. Despite their divorce in June 2017, Amanda lived in fear of Kevin, who had physically abused her in the past, leaving her with bruises. After their separation, Kevin continued to threaten her. In August 2017, Amanda was granted full custody of their 3 young children, and Kevin was ordered to provide $800 in monthly support instead of child support. This marked a fresh start for Amanda, who focused on rebuilding her life in Everett, Washington, and was grateful for the support of her family as a single mother. Kevin, a former military man, threatened to kill Amanda, and she took him seriously due to his training. Believing she was the target, Amanda obtained a restraining order against Kevin, but he violated it multiple times. He would often lurk around her house, peeking through the windows, which terrified not only Amanda, but also her 3 children. Despite the violations, Kevin was never charged by the police. Weeks before her sister's tragic death, Amanda was brutally beaten in her own driveway. She was getting out of her car late one night when someone launched a surprise attack. Although the assault happened quickly and she didn't see the attacker's face, Amanda was convinced that Kevin was behind it. Investigators believe 30-year-old Kevin Lewis is the prime suspect in the murder of Alicia. They think he intended to kill his ex-wife, but he was unaware that she was in New York at the time. Unbeknownst to him, Amanda had asked Alicia to babysit her children while she was away. However, there's a problem with this theory. If Kevin was the person in the footage, it would mean he was at his home during the shooting. Moreover, His sister and mother have provided him with a solid alibi. As a result, the police have continued their investigation, exploring alternative explanations for the crime. They returned to Amanda's house to re-examine the crime scene and track the path of the bullets. The investigation revealed that Alicia was shot when the door was only partially open. The shooter fired at least 7 shots from outside the house, which entered the interior. The evidence suggests that the shooter stood next to the garage and fired, then moved towards the door and fired again from inside. The medical examiner determined that Alicia died from multiple gunshot wounds to the head and torso, with 5 shots hitting her. 2 of the wounds showed signs of gunpowder residue, indicating close-range shots. While the examiner couldn't determine the exact order of the 5 shots, they believe the last 2 head wounds were likely the final 2 inflicted. Furthermore, experts concluded that the 7 shell casings found at the scene came from the same gun. Alicia's head wounds were caused by close-range bullet shots. The investigators explored the possibility of a personal motive behind her murder, but found no evidence to support this theory. The shell casings discovered at the crime scene were a rare Russian-made brand called Tul Ammo, which gave the police hope of tracing the seller and buyer. The police learned that Walmart had sold the 9mm Tul Ammo cartridges and had CCTV footage of the purchase. Upon reviewing the footage recorded 2 days before Alicia's death, they initially suspected Kevin Lewis as the buyer. However, the footage revealed a different person who paid using a credit card. The police identified this individual, but found no connection to Kevin Lewis, Alicia, or the nanny. The investigation thus required new leads and evidence. Amanda was questioned by investigators about her relationship with Kevin. She revealed that their relationship started well, but Kevin eventually became aggressive and violent, leading to their divorce, a restraining order, and Amanda gaining full custody of their children. Despite this, Amanda believed that she was the intended target of the shooting that killed Alicia, not Alicia herself. She suspected that Lewis had orchestrated the attack, but investigators knew that Kevin was at home at the time of the shooting. Upon re-examining the footage from the night of Alicia's death, investigators noticed something they had previously overlooked. The low-quality recording showed Kevin leaving his house and getting into the back seat of a car behind the driver. This raised questions, as most people would typically sit in the front passenger seat. The likely explanation was that someone else was already sitting in the front passenger seat, meaning there were probably 2 people in the car by the time it arrived at Kevin's house. This new evidence didn't directly link Kevin to Alicia's death, but it did contribute to the growing case against him for attacking his ex-wife Amanda. In November 2018, Kevin was arrested and later sentenced to 3 years in prison. Over a year had passed since Alicia's tragic death, yet her case remained a mystery. However, a breakthrough finally came in 2019 when the police station received a crucial call from a woman with vital information. The caller claimed to have met a girl named Angelica at a party in nearby Spokane, who boasted about being hired to commit a murder on York Road, the same road where Alicia was fatally shot. Although the police were initially skeptical, given the significant distance of 5 hours between Spokane and Everett. According to the caller, Angelica had proudly shared details about how she and her boyfriend were involved in the crime. Alexis Hale, alias Angelica, claimed a woman was fatally shot in the head, saying the killer was hired by the children's father and mistakenly targeted the wrong person. Police were interested in her detailed knowledge of the case. They discovered her true identity, found social media photos of her with a 9mm pistol, and videos featuring her boyfriend, Jadon Phelps. A video posted by Alexis on the night of the murder helped investigators pinpoint her location, about 10 minutes from Kevin Lewis's house. Jadon boasted about a large sum of money on social media, leading police to discover his connection to Kevin through his aunt. With this evidence, they made an arrest. The first person to be taken into custody was Alexis Hale, who protested loudly claiming she was only 17 and couldn't be arrested. However, she knew why she was being arrested and demanded a lawyer. Police arrested Jadon Phelps, analyzing his and Hale's phone records, showing they drove from Spokane to Everett to commit the shooting. Security footage from Lewis's neighbors revealed someone in a white top leaving and returning around the time of the crime. Lewis was wearing a white top when questioned. Phelps, in custody, revealed Kevin Lewis hired him and Hale and led police through the crime scene, pointing out the door and corner. He stood where he was positioned during the crime, reenacting the events, and admitted to shooting at the door when it opened slightly, then firing 2 more shots before fleeing. Kevin Lewis was already in jail for crime when he was arrested and charged with aggravated murder with a firearm, conspiracy to commit murder, and solicitation to commit murder in connection with the September 2017 death of Alicia. In July 2020, 20-year-old Phelps pleaded guilty to premeditated first-degree murder and was sentenced to 31 years in prison. His co-defendant, 18-year-old Hale, also pleaded guilty to the same charge and received a 15-year sentence. During the trial, Phelps testified that he committed the crime for financial gain and to increase his reputation on the streets. He used the money Lewis paid him to get tattoos, purchase a pair of Timberland boots, and buy a Ferragamo belt buckle. Phelps claimed that his former girlfriend had obtained the gun used in the crime from a family member, and he had given her $200. Lewis pleaded not guilty and faced trial. Prosecutors alleged he paid $2,400 to his cousin and girlfriend to kill his ex-wife, but they mistakenly targeted Alicia. Lewis directed them to the address, claiming he didn't know the target. Phelps and Hale exited their vehicle, with Phelps stopping near the garage and Hale knocking on the door. As Alicia opened it, Phelps fired multiple shots, eventually walking up to the porch, and they fled. They returned, fearing they left a glove, but saw police and drove away. Finally, Judge Thompson also ordered Lewis to no longer have any contact with his ex-wife, his children, and Phelps and Hale for the rest of his life. Records indicate that he remains incarcerated at the Washington State Penitentiary in Walla Walla County. The case of Vera Pekteleva. Vera Pekteleva was born on September 24, 1997, in Kelos, Kovo Oblast. She grew up to be a cheerful, creative, and talented individual who excelled in singing competitions during her school years. Despite her parents, Oksana and Yvonne, divorcing while she was still in school, Vera maintained a good relationship with both of them and their new partner. People who knew her described Vera as kind, positive, and avoiding conflict. After graduating from high school, Vera surprised her family by enrolling in the State Technical University in Kovo instead of pursuing a career in the arts. Her mother, Oksana, lived in Kisilov, about 110 miles from Kovo, and Vera would visit her during her free time. During one of these visits in 2016, Vera met Vladislav Kanyus, a young man her age. Vladislav was her opposite in many ways. He lacked direction, was introverted, and had a quick temper. He had dropped out of school after 9th grade and came from a troubled home. His mother had abandoned the family, leaving him to live with his father, who had legal problems and eventually took his own life in front of Vladislav. This traumatic experience had a lasting impact on Vladislav's life. Vera and Vladislav's relationship was unlikely, as they had little in common. Despite this, Vera fell in love with him. However, her parents were strongly opposed to the relationship due to Vladislav's troubled past. They wanted a better life for Vera and disapproved of her choice. Vera's mother, Oksana, stated that they waited for Vera to end the relationship, but instead, she stopped talking about Vladislav with them. Vladislav was never invited to family gatherings and did not appear in Vera's social media photos, making it seem like she was hiding him. In 2019, Vera and Vladislav moved in together in Kovo, with her parents helping to pay for the apartment. Although Vladislav was unemployed and had no intention of changing that, he enjoyed living with Vera, who was beautiful, smart, and financially stable. As a result, she supported him. The relationship was tense, and Vladislav's alcohol abuse was a major concern. Vera's parents suspected that Vladislav was physically abusing her as well. Vera ended her toxic relationship with Vladislav in November 2019 with the help of her parents, who assisted her in paying for a new apartment. Logically, Vladislav should have moved out, but he refused to do so, as he enjoyed living at someone else's expense. According to Vladislav's testimony, he and Vera had a fight on December 15, 2019, because he wanted to go to a nightclub, but she declined. Vladislav claimed that during their relationship, Vera began to distance herself from him, often traveling to Kalos, and eventually admitting to communicating with someone else. Keep in mind that this is Vladislav's testimony, and it's up to you to decide how credible his words are. According to Vladislav, a month before their breakup, Vera told him she was leaving him. Later, he found out from a mutual friend that she was already seeing someone else, a guy named Alexander from Selos. He didn't know Alexander personally. After learning this, he wanted to talk to Vera about it. They were still living together in the same apartment at the time. On December 15, 2019, they had a fight and she left, taking some of her things with her. Even though they weren't together anymore, they stayed in touch by phone. On January 12, 2020, he called Vera and offered to help her move her remaining belongings to a new place. She agreed, and they planned to meet up the next day to do the move. When January 13th came around, Vera showed up, and they packed up both her stuff and his, since he was planning to move out of the apartment too. He didn't want to stay there without her. On January 13th, 2020, Vladislav and Vera consumed beer, lure, and vodka while packing. They both became intoxicated. Despite their inebriated state, they did not argue during the drinking session, which continued until 5 a.m. on January 14, 2020. However, a conflict emerged when Vladislav brought up their relationship and suggested they get back together. He also confronted her about seeing another guy, which Vera denied. This led to an altercation, during which Vera became aggressive, swearing, insulting, and physically attacking Vladislav. She kicked him in the groin area at least 5 times and slapped him in the face at least 8 times. Although he didn't feel pain from the slaps, the kicks caused him physical discomfort. Vladislav claimed that Vera's aggression was triggered by his discovery of her infidelity, which made him angry. Vera, on the other hand, accused him of prying into her personal life and continued to insult him. This is the version of events as told by Vladislav to the police. However, there are reasons to believe that Vladislav's testimony may not be entirely truthful. Vera was determined to move out of the apartment she shared with Vladislav and wanted no part in drinking with him. She asked her friend to assist her with the move and sent a voice message at 5:08 p.m., saying she was already packing her belongings and would be at her new apartment by 6 p.m. She requested her friend's help in transporting her belongings from the taxi to the new apartment. However, just 3 minutes later, Vera sent another voice message inviting her friend to come to her current apartment to help with the move. But before she could finish, Vladislav intervened, stating that no one was allowed in the apartment, effectively blocking her friend from coming. The situation was escalating, and at 5:15 p.m., Vera sent a quiet, low-voiced message to her friend, seemingly a distress call, as she attempted to keep it from Vladislav's ears. 10 minutes later, at 5:25 p.m., Vera sent another voice message, but this time Vladislav's voice could be heard, instructing Vera's friend not to bother them and to wait for Vera to text her. By 7:19 p.m., Vladislav had taken control, sending a voice message himself. From that point on, Vera was silenced, and her friend no longer heard from her. It seemed that Vera was trapped alone with Vladislav. The night took a dark turn when, at around 3 a.m., the neighbors on the same floor were awoken by blood-curdling screams coming from apartment 738. A bystander described the unfolding tragedy as a massacre. The screams from the apartment were so loud that 15 people, including Vladislav's brother, gathered in the hallway. Vladislav's brother recalled his brother's previous threats to harm Vera and realized they needed to intervene. Since the door was made of iron, the neighbors searched for tools to pry it open. Meanwhile, Vera's desperate cries for help continued to echo from the apartment. The bystanders called the emergency service multiple times, but their calls were ultimately part of a separate investigation. Despite the repeated calls, the police failed to arrive for 30 minutes until 6:30 a.m. During this agonizing period, the neighbors made 7 emergency calls, but no help came. The last words they heard from Vladislav were, "Vera, forgive me, I love you very much." Finally, the neighbors found a crowbar in a nearby parking lot and broke down the door. Tragically, they found Vera dead and Vladislav, who was heavily intoxicated, in the bathroom. Meanwhile, the 112 operators were indifferent to the emergency calls, chatting, laughing, and drinking tea, complaining about being disturbed as Vera lay dying at the hands of her former boyfriend. The police did not arrive at the scene until after Vera's death had been reported. They later justified their delayed response by claiming that one of their patrol cars had no gas and that all available officers were busy handling other emergency calls. As a result, the operators who handled the 112 emergency calls and the police officers on duty that night were also put on trial. A police station video was made public, showing officers displaying a shocking lack of urgency. Vladislav Kanyus initially claimed that he and Vera didn't have any conflicts until 5 a.m., but forensic evidence disputed this, showing that he had lied. In reality, Vera's first injury occurred around midnight, which meant that Vladislav had brutally beaten and injured her for 6 hours before she eventually died. The autopsy results were shocking, revealing a total of 100 injuries on Vera's body, including stab wounds, a broken nose and ribs, and evidence of strangulation around her neck. The community was outrageously upset, and more than 1,000 people attended her funeral, exceeding the church's capacity. Vera's mother, Oksana, was left devastated by the unrecognizable state of her daughter's body, which required an extensive 4-hour restoration process at the funeral home. At the same time, Vladislav was providing a false account to investigators, trying to downplay his role in the vicious crime. The indictment alleges that the police officers were negligent in their response to the situation. They had access to gasoline, but even if they didn't, they should have taken necessary steps to resolve the issue. However, they didn't treat the situation as urgent and failed to take prompt action. Furthermore, the 2 police officers refused to cooperate with the investigation and denied any wrongdoing. Their defense was that when witnesses reported the screams and cries for help, the investigation team was already occupied at a different location where a corpse had been discovered earlier. In 2022, Vladislav Kanyus was sentenced to 17 years in prison after admitting partial guilt. He was also ordered to pay $45,000 in compensation. Vera's parents were shocked by the leniency of the sentence and planned to appeal. However, Vladislav didn't serve his full sentence. In April 2023, it was discovered that he had received a presidential pardon after serving just 6 months in prison. Furthermore, photos of him in military uniform surfaced online in November 2023. Vladislav Kanyus, the person responsible for Vera's death, was not only pardoned but also relieved of the obligation to pay compensation to her parents. The news sparked widespread outrage in Russia. The press secretary of the Russian president explained the pardoning procedure, stating that it involves a series of steps. First, the convict must confess to their crime. Then, the request for pardon is reviewed at multiple levels, including the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Regional, Federal District, and Central Commission, before reaching the president. Alternatively, convicts can also redeem themselves by fighting on the battlefield, where they risk their lives under fire. This alternative path to redemption is difficult to accept, especially for Vera's parents, who were devastated. The case of Tess Ritchie. Tess Ritchie was the youngest of 5 sisters, born on November 30, 1994. She spent her childhood in North Bay before moving to Toronto at the age of 19. According to her sister Verena, Tess loved her life, dogs, and family. She worked as a waitress in Toronto, but her dream job was to become a flight attendant and travel the world. Although Tess struggled to find a job she liked, her family was always willing to support her financially. Some sources suggest that after failing to find work at an airline or hotel, she began learning Italian and searching for job opportunities in Italy online. Tess also created content on YouTube, with her last video uploaded on February 23, 2014, nearly 4 years before the events we will discuss. In that video, Tess shared her personal experiences and the challenges she faced. Tess explained that she searched everywhere for someone who would understand and relate to what she was experiencing, but she never found that. She said her boyfriend's physical abuse is never acceptable, no matter how minor it may seem. She stated that he hit her, and even downplaying it as just throwing a purse at her is embarrassing because it happened in his bedroom, and it's a sad reality. After recording this video, Tess mentioned that she faced more personal struggles. In 2017, she experienced a devastating breakup with her boyfriend Julian on November 23rd. The next day, she turned to her older sister Rachel, who was not only 8 years older, but also her closest confidant. Tess recounted that she spent most of November 24th at Rachel's house in Toronto, where they discussed her breakup, went shopping, and visited a dog park. Rachel had to encourage her to eat dinner because she had lost her appetite due to stress. Despite her emotional state, Tess made plans to meet an old school friend, Riley Samar, that night. Samar was from North Bay, and she had moved to Toronto in the summer of 2017. They hadn't seen each other in years, but now that they were both living in the same city, they had started talking again. Samar suggested they go to Cruise and Tango, a well-known drag bar in the church in Wellesley area, that evening. Rachel's partner arranged for Richie to take an Uber to meet Samar downtown. Richie saw her sister Tess running out to catch the Uber, which was the last time she would ever see her alive. Richie arrived at the Cruise and Tango club around midnight, but Samar wasn't there yet. The club was packed, and Tess sent a text to her sister to let her know she had arrived safely. The next morning, Richie sent a text to her sister, not expecting a quick response since Tess had been out late the night before. However, by 6:30 p.m., Richie still hadn't heard back from Tess. She then discovered that none of her texts had been delivered to Tess's phone. When Richie tried calling, the calls went straight to voicemail. Their mother, Christine Hermiston, also attempted to contact Tess, but her phone was turned off. Christine got a notification that her daughter Tess had ordered an Uber at 4:02 a.m., but then the ride was canceled. This happened because Tess had used Christine's credit card to set up her Uber account, so Christine received updates on all of Tess's Uber rides. When Christine and her family couldn't reach Tess during the day and her phone stayed off, they started to worry because Tess always kept in touch with them. Rachel typically kept her phone with her at all times. On Saturday night around 9 p.m., she asked her partner to check on her sister's apartment in Scarborough while she reached out to her friends. Tess was still missing, and her family was growing increasingly worried. Rachel began calling hospitals and also contacted the police. By the following evening, the police had no updates for Tess's family. Multiple officers were assigned to search for Tess Richie, but no one had seen or heard from her in the past 2 days. On Monday, Tess's mother, Christine, and one of her sisters traveled from North Bay to Toronto to help with the search. They distributed flyers featuring Tess's picture, hoping someone might recognize her. The family did everything they could, but unfortunately, the police's investigation into Tess's disappearance was lacking. Meanwhile, Tess's friend Riley, who had gone to the bar with her that night, returned home safely. When asked about Tess's whereabouts, Riley mentioned that they had both been drinking heavily, which led to the bar's security asking them to leave. They left the bar shortly after 2 a.m., and headed to Wellesley Street to grab a bite to eat. On their way, they met a guy who decided to join them, but Riley couldn't remember his name. Once on Wellesley Street, they ordered hot dogs. Tess asked for a vegetarian hot dog, which led to a disagreement with the vendor. Tess thought she received a meat hot dog, and Riley noted that Tess accidentally sprayed mustard all over the vendor's cart. After that, Tess, Riley, and their new companion ran to Dundonald Street. There, they encountered a woman named Michelle on her porch and struck up a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. Tess confided in Michelle about her recent breakup and how difficult it had been for her. Michelle offered her support, and they even exchanged phone numbers. Michelle observed that Richie seemed to be trying to enjoy himself, but when she looked into his eyes, she noticed a deep sadness. The breakup with Julian seemed to be affecting Riley heavily. Riley reassured her that things would improve and encouraged her to stay strong. At 4 a.m., Riley got a text from her boyfriend asking her to come home. She said goodbye to Tess and headed towards Yonge Street before going home. Tess felt let down that Riley had left so early. At 4:02 a.m., she ordered an Uber, suggesting that she decided to go home too after Riley left. The Uber driver arrived at 4:14 a.m., but Tess was not there. On Wednesday, November 29th, just a day before Tess's 23rd birthday, Christine began handing out flyers with her daughter's picture in the area where Tess was last seen. Since Riley had separated from Tess on Dundonald Street, Christine decided to investigate that area. She reached out to Anne Brazo, a nurse at St. Michael's Hospital, knowing their daughters had been friends since elementary school in North Bay. Together, they began searching for Richie as efforts intensified and social media campaigns aimed to find her. During this time, Brazo made a chilling discovery while looking into the bottom of an outdoor stairwell at a construction site located at 582 Church Street. She immediately recognized Richie's body lying on the concrete. "I was in complete shock, horror, disbelief. I couldn't understand what I was seeing," said Anne, fighting back tears. Feeling frightened, she noticed dust from a nearby gravel pile settled on Richie's body. Brazo let go of the staircase railing and stepped back down the gravel driveway toward Church Street. Meanwhile, Hermiston was further up the sidewalk, unaware that her daughter's body was so near. Brazo called out to her, "Christine, come back here. There's a girl in the stairwell. You need to come back." Hermiston turned and ran down the driveway, stopping suddenly at the stairwell. After a few moments, she began to scream, pleading with God for assistance. Tess's death presented a heartbreaking event for her entire family. They discovered her body only 300 yards from the bar where she had been before disappearing, and just 20 yards from the last place her friend Riley saw her. This situation raised many questions about the police's response, especially since her body had been found just a couple of blocks from the bar. After Anne and Christine located Tess's body, an anonymous police source shared new information with the media. It was reported that Tessa had advertised her intimate services online and had worked at a strip club. Tessa's mother stated that the Toronto police did not adequately search for Richie because they assumed she was an escort. This assumption was horrifying to Hermiston, who expressed her anger at the media's portrayal. After Richie's body was found, police sources claimed she was involved in the sex trade, which Hermiston called a blatant lie. They spread this information to suggest she led a high-risk lifestyle, deflecting blame from themselves. Although Tess briefly worked as a waitress at a strip club, she quit less than 2 weeks after starting. The mention of intimate services was linked to a dating site account, not a profession. Despite the discovery of Richie's body, the circumstances of her death remained unclear. Initially, police did not suspect foul play, but the homicide unit took over when an autopsy indicated she had died from neck compression. Additionally, they discovered seminal fluid on her clothing and saliva on her bra. DNA tests revealed male DNA, prompting police to begin searching for a suspect. Based on Riley's testimony, detectives aimed to identify the man Tess had met that night as he was the person she spent time with after Riley went home. The police examined CCTV footage to gather information about that night. The video shows Tess and Riley leaving the bar and heading towards a hot dog vendor. There were also cameras on the building near where Anne discovered the body. After reviewing the recordings, the police observed Tess and an unidentified man walking hand in hand up the gravel driveway. According to the police, the camera captured Tess and this unknown man at 4:14 a.m. A subsequent recording taken 46 minutes later showed the man leaving the location alone, with no further footage of Tess. This led the police to consider him the main suspect in the Tess Ritchie case. On December 10th, during a press conference, the Toronto police released images of him obtained from the surveillance footage. They hoped that someone would be able to identify him. The police discovered the identity of the man after seeing the published images. He called the police station himself and stated that he was the guy in the photo. The person who was with Tess that night was identified as 21-year-old Colin Schlatter. In the fall of 2017, Schlatter was 21 years old and living with his parents and younger brother in their home in North Toronto. He had completed a year of postgraduate studies to become a car mechanic and was working with his father in construction. Schlatter, along with his parents and one of his lawyers, visited the police station where he spoke briefly with detectives but chose not to testify. But finally, they provided the police with important evidence. While still at the police station, Schlatter discarded an empty water bottle in a trash can. The police took the bottle and sent it for forensic analysis. After some time, they found that the DNA on the bottle matched DNA samples taken from seminal fluid and saliva found on Tess Ritchie's body, indicating that they came from the same person. Police planned an undercover operation to observe Schlatter for several weeks, but the DNA results sped up their timeline. Schlatter was arrested at approximately 11 p.m. on February 4, 2018, after watching the Super Bowl with his family at a cinema. He was taken to the 13th Division and placed in a holding cell at 3:19 a.m. on February 5th. Two other men were in holding cells next to him, both of whom were undercover police officers. Schlatter was unaware that he was about to provide them with a significant amount of evidence. The three men were in plain holding cells, each containing a combination toilet, sink, and bed. In the cell, Schlatter discussed his love for card games and claimed he had a knack for attracting women. He bragged about having slept with over 40 women, even though he was only 21. Schlatter did not encounter Tess and her friend Riley on the street. He saw them for the first time in the same bar where he was present. This recording was made just before security asked Tess and Riley to leave the bar. Schlatter also spoke to undercover officers about Tess. Initially, he claimed she was alive when he departed. However, he later suggested that something might have happened because alcohol had clouded his memory. He doubted his own capability. The police charged Ken Schlatter with the murder of Tess Ritchie, but he denied the accusation. In June 2018, police officers Alan McCullough and Michael Jones were charged with 2 counts of misconduct for neglect of duty under Ontario's Police Services Act. The report of hearing stated that they allegedly failed to thoroughly search the nearby property or immediate area, interview neighbors, and inform a supervisor. If they had followed protocol, Christine Hermiston stated, they would have found her. She was lying just around the corner. During the 2020 trial of Ken Schlatter, his defense argued that someone else could have approached the stairs where Tess was lying by climbing over the fence on the other side of the building, thus avoiding the cameras. The lawyers even named another suspect, but the police thoroughly investigated and interrogated this person, finding no evidence linking him to Tess's death. DNA evidence pointed to only one person, Ken Schlatter. Schlatter, a slight man who appeared soft-spoken in court, explained that he has a speech defect, causing him to slur his words and stutter sometimes. He claimed that Tess offered him a place to hide from prying eyes at 4:02 a.m., which explained the presence of his DNA on her belongings. Tess Ritchie had ordered an Uber, but when the driver arrived at the pickup point at 4:14 a.m., she wasn't there. Instead, Calvin Schlatter approached her again. They sat down on a bench at the corner of street. Schlatter stated that Tess seemed upset after their argument, so he went over to check on her. Schlatter claimed Tess asked him to sit and talk, but with no audio on security videos, it can't be confirmed. He said she was upset about her breakup, so he shared a similar experience to comfort her. Schlatter claimed that later, Tess asked if it was okay to kiss him. He said they stood up, hugged, and kissed each other. However, there is no footage of this kiss on the available CCTV footage. Schlatter claims that Tess Ritchie asked him to accompany her to the driveway at 582 Church Street and then down the outdoor stairwell. However, the prosecution questioned his motives, as an Uber driver was waiting for Tess at the time. It is unclear what Schlatter said to Tess to persuade her to walk with him into the darkness at 4 a.m. According to Schlatter, they kissed for a long time, and he ejaculated in his pants. He wanted to take things further, but Tess refused. Schlatter states that after this, he invited Tess to his house, but she declined and told him to leave. He claims that he left, and Tess was alive when he departed. There were only 2 people who knew the truth about the events of that night. Unfortunately, one of them had already passed away. During the trial, the prosecution presented 2 key witnesses, Riley, a friend of Tess, and Michelle Tepp, a woman who had spoken with Tess and Schlatter that night. Both Riley and Michelle identified Schlatter. In addition to talking to 2 undercover police officers, Schlatter is also alleged to have shared important details with a cellmate, known only as ES due to a publication ban, when they were both being held at a Toronto detention center for about 2 months in 2018. ES has a long history of criminal activity, including multiple break-ins and a domestic assault. The informant, who shared a cell with Calvin Schlatter, initially felt sympathetic towards Schlatter because he was a young man experiencing imprisonment for the first time. However, as time passed, his opinion of Schlatter changed. Schlatter would often cry himself to sleep, claiming he didn't want to serve his sentence and missing his mother. Despite this, Schlatter showed no regret when discussing the death of Tess Ritchie. According to him, Schlatter admitted to kissing Ritchie and losing control when she refused to go further, ultimately strangling her with a scarf. In court, Schlatter denied having these conversations with the informant, and his lawyer portrayed the informant as a deceitful liar. Nevertheless, physical evidence suggests that Ritchie was strangled, and only Schlatter's DNA was found on her clothing. In her final statement to the jury, defense attorney Lydia Riva presented her client, Schlatter, as a harmless and innocent young man. She acknowledged that it can be difficult to accept, but the criminal justice system is not infallible and can sometimes make mistakes. On March 23, 2020, the jury delivered a guilty verdict, and the judge sentenced Schlatter to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The trial was emotionally devastating for Ritchie's family and supporters, who were often left reeling and in tears in the courtroom. Tess's death has left the family feeling guilty and broken, struggling to look at each other. They're seeking $20 million in damages, including punitive damages, to ensure justice for their daughter. The case of Ashley Renee Lyons. Ashley Renee Lyons was born on July 21, 1985, in Scott County. She was active in the FFA program at Scott County High School, graduating in 2003. Ashley's brother Chris shared her passion for repairing cars, but her true interest was her boyfriend Roger McBee. After they broke up, Ashley discovered she was pregnant with his child. On January 7, 2004, Ashley learned she was having a boy and was overjoyed. She told her mom and brother about her plans to meet Roger and his parents at a restaurant in Stamping Ground. Despite her mom's offer to lend her car, Ashley opted to drive herself, saying she wouldn't be gone long. As she departed, her mom remembered her final words, "I love you, Mom. I'll be back soon." That evening, Chris received a call from Roger, who couldn't meet with Ashley and had tried calling her but didn't get an answer. When Ashley didn't return home by 8 p.m. and didn't answer her mother's calls, Carol started to worry. She called Roger's mother and learned the meeting had been canceled, sparking a frantic search for Ashley. Chris and his father searched for her, eventually checking Scott County Park, one of Ashley's favorite places. Ashley often visited Scott County Park with her boyfriend Roger, and later she would feed the ducks there on her own. The park is about 10 miles from Stamping Ground. One day, Chris and his father were driving around the park when they saw a car that looked like Ashley's. As they got closer, they realized it was indeed her car, with the engine running and the lights on. When they approached the car, Chris saw that the driver's side window was down, and Ashley was sitting inside with her head down. She was wearing a seatbelt but was unresponsive. Chris opened the door, shook her, and hoped she was just sleeping. But when he looked at his hand, he saw blood. He immediately called 911. Sadly, by the time Chris called for help, Ashley had already passed away, and the doctors couldn't save her. The devastating news soon reached Ashley's mom, who was overwhelmed with grief. The investigators arrived at the crime scene, and since Ashley's death was a result of a crime, her body remained in the car until the evidence was collected. At the scene, investigators found the car's engine running, the heater and radio on, and the driver's side window rolled down. A quick examination revealed the cause of Ashley's death. 3 9mm shell casings lay on the ground beside the car, and Ashley had sustained gunshot wounds to the head and neck. Despite a thorough search, the police were unable to find the murder weapon in the park. The unusual circumstances of the shooting suggested that Ashley was familiar with her killer. The fact that the window was down on a chilly night was suspicious, and the position of Ashley's body indicated that she had not attempted to defend herself or escape. From these clues, investigators concluded that Ashley knew her killer. The crime scene revealed that Ashley's wallet and phone were still in the car, leading investigators to quickly rule out robbery as a motive. The car's interior held a poignant clue: scattered ultrasound pictures, which Ashley had likely been looking at in the final moments of her life. At 5 months pregnant, Ashley's murder also claimed the life of her unborn son, Landon. This heinous crime was unprecedented in Scott County, and the community demanded that the police find the perpetrator. Ashley's parents told investigators she planned to meet Roger, the father of her unborn child, on the day she died. Roger was distraught, overwhelmed by emotion, and couldn't imagine who could harm his ex-girlfriend and their child. Investigators brought him in for further questioning. Roger told investigators he canceled a restaurant meeting with Ashley due to other meetings. He called her twice, but she didn't answer, so he called her home and asked Chris to have her call him back. Roger's account matched Chris's previous statement about Ashley's plans. Carol defended Roger, calling him a nice guy who got along with her family and not believe he'd harm Ashley and Landon. As investigators searched for clues, Ashley's family sought answers. Carol found her daughter's diary detailing daily life. One name stood out: Dina Williams, a classmate from a poor background, often wearing the same clothes. Initially, Ashley and Dina were friends, but their friendship deteriorated due to Dina's jealousy. Dina envied Ashley's possessions and relationships, including her romance with Roger. Ashley documented their multiple fights in her diary. Carol discovered this information from Ashley's diary and became suspicious of Dina's involvement in Ashley's death. After Ashley and Roger broke up, Dina quickly started dating Roger, which raised Carol's suspicions. Furthermore, Ashley's pregnancy with Roger's child might have motivated Dina to eliminate her as a rival for Roger's attention. Carol handed over the diary to the investigators, believing it held crucial evidence. The investigators also found Ashley's descriptions of her tumultuous relationship with Dina to be revealing. As a result, Dina was brought in for questioning at the police station, where she denied any role in Ashley's death. Dina, who worked at a bank, told investigators that she had an alibi for the evening of the crime. She was at an office party. Although she openly expressed her dislike for Ashley, especially because of her pregnancy, the lack of sentiment towards Ashley's death wasn't enough to detain her, so she was let go. The ballistic examination results revealed that the shooter was likely around 5 feet 10 inches tall. Since Dina was only 5 feet 5 inches tall, it seemed unlikely that she was the perpetrator. However, her twin brother Thomas, who matched the estimated height, had previously inquired about inducing a miscarriage, according to rumors. Moreover, people claimed that Thomas would do anything his sister asked. The investigators questioned Thomas, but he denied any involvement, and without evidence, they had no choice but to release him. Investigators' search for clues continued as Ashley's family prepared for the funeral, grappling with the unimaginable pain of losing 2 loved ones. During the autopsy, the fetus was removed from Ashley's body. Ashley and Landon were laid to rest together, a heart-wrenching gesture. The fact that the perpetrator remained at large added to the family's devastation. Ashley's parents offered a $3,000 reward, later increased to $5,000, for any information that could help catch their daughter's killer. This led to a flood of calls from people who thought they might have helpful information. One call in particular stood out. A woman who lived near the park where Ashley was shot reported that she might have seen the perpetrator. She described seeing someone running out of the park, jumping over a fence, and then getting into a red Chevrolet pickup truck that was waiting with its engine running. The truck sped away soon after. This crucial eyewitness account suggested that there might be more than one person involved in Ashley's murder, and that investigators should be looking for at least 2 suspects. The discovery of the red pickup truck led everyone who knew Ashley to suspect Roger, since he owned a similar vehicle. The police promptly took Roger's truck into custody and conducted a thorough search, but unfortunately, they found no incriminating evidence inside. The investigators decided to re-interview Dina and her brother Thomas. They started by questioning Thomas, who initially denied any involvement. However, after learning that a witness had placed Roger's pickup truck at the crime scene, Thomas became more cooperative. When asked if he knew who killed Ashley, he quickly replied that it was Roger McBeath. Thomas eventually made a deal with the investigators, trading his cooperation for a lighter sentence. He confessed to providing the gun to Roger, who then used it to shoot Ashley. Thomas also revealed that Roger had disposed of the weapon in Elorn Creek. After an extensive 6-hour dive search, the police finally found the gun, which was later confirmed through ballistics testing to be the murder weapon. The investigators initially suspected Dina of being the shooter, but they soon ruled her out due to a discrepancy in height. However, during further questioning, Dina revealed that she was the getaway driver on the night of the crime. This led to the arrests of Roger McBeath, Dina Williams, and her twin brother Thomas. It was clear that Roger was motivated by his desire to avoid becoming a father. Ashley, on the other hand, was excited to become a mother and had the full support of her family. Roger devised a sinister plan to eliminate the problem. He lured Ashley to Scott County Park under the pretense of a meeting with his parents at a nearby restaurant. Dina drove him to the park, where he approached Ashley's car with a gun. As Ashley rolled down her window to show him ultrasound pictures, Roger shot her 3 times, killing her and their unborn child. He then fled the scene in the pickup truck, escaping with Dina's help. The perpetrators stopped and got rid of the gun by throwing it into the river. Roger McBeath denied any involvement. Thomas Dina, on the other hand, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in the crime. As part of his plea deal, Dina admitted to accepting $11,000 from Roger to harm Ashley and cause her to have a miscarriage. Although the plan was never carried out, Dina agreed to give Roger the gun used in the murder, according to court records. In 2005, Dina Williams pleaded guilty as part of a plea deal. The prosecutors recommended that she serve a total of 20 years in prison. making her eligible for parole after serving 17 years of her sentence. Prosecutors planned to call witnesses who would testify that Dina wanted Ashley dead, conspired with Roger to poison her, and even offered $1,000 to cause a miscarriage. When these plans failed, they turned to more extreme measures. Dina claimed her public defender warned her she'd likely be found guilty. She was distressed, saying she pleaded guilty to something she didn't do. Dina admitted driving Roger to the park, but said she drove around the subdivision while they met and later returned to pick him up. During her drive, a woman heard 3 gunshots, but at the time, she didn't know what they were. Dina, who was involved in the events, stated that Roger had planned something without her knowledge. Later, he called Ashley on his phone, telling her he loved her and was sorry he missed meeting her at the park. The jury listened to a recording of this message during Roger's trial. According to Dina, when she left the park, Roger never mentioned that Ashley was dead. Dina also claimed that she didn't report the incident to the police because she was afraid of Roger, who she said was abusive towards her. Dina Williams said she was terrified of Roger, who threatened to kill her. She expressed regret and sympathy for the Ashley family. However, Roger's parents disputed her testimony, calling her a compulsive liar who acted impulsively. They accused Dina of being jealous of Ashley and taking a plea deal to avoid responsibility. Dina was sentenced to 20 years in prison, released on parole in 2021, and claimed she was young and influenced by Roger at the time of the crime, denying knowledge of his relationship with the victim. During her time in prison, Dina participated in various rehabilitation programs, including anger management, legal aid training, horticulture, and Braille transcription courses. Roger's initial murder conviction was overturned in 2009 by the Kentucky Supreme Court due to illegally obtained evidence. The court ruled that prosecutors had used evidence from an unauthorized jail informant who had engaged in casual conversations with Roger, hoping to elicit incriminating statements. The informant had exceeded his authorized role, leading to the conviction being overturned. Roger later pleaded guilty to being an accomplice to murder and tampering with evidence, and was sentenced to 42 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 16 years. He also received a concurrent 5-year sentence for evidence tampering. At his 2023 parole hearing, Roger expressed remorse for his actions, stating that he didn't deserve parole and was truly sorry for what he had done. He wanted to apologize to the family of Ashley Lyons, the mother of his child, whom he had loved deeply. Although he acknowledged his daily regret, his parole eligibility was declined and the hearing was discontinued. Roger remains in prison. In memory of Ashley, an angel garden with ceramic angel statues has been created at Scott County Park, where she tragically died. After Ashley's death, Carol and her husband Buford Lyons worked to pass a law that recognizes violence against a pregnant woman as 2 separate crimes, one against the woman herself and another against her unborn child. This law was passed at both the state and federal levels.